Shalini.
Yes, Didi. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Shalini, kindly start.
Yes. Is everyone present, Didi? Should I start?
Yeah, you can start.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of BIT Mr. Fraternity, I would like to extend a warm and hearty welcome to our workshop on short-term training program on research neurology basics organized by Birla Institute of Technology off campus Lalpur Ranchi. It is a great pleasure to have amidst us our special guest, Mr. Manas Kumar Mandal. Sir will be talking on the topic of attitude, measurement, and scaling. A special welcome to our director, Dr. Vandana Bhattacharya, ma'am, who has been kind enough to support our endeavors. A very warm welcome to our esteemed faculty members, other guests, and attendees present here. Our guest speaker, Mr. Manas Kumar Mandal, was the distinguished scientist and Director General in Life Science. He has also served as Chief Controller, Research and Development at Life Science, as Scientist and Director at Defense Institute of Psychological Research and Professor of Psychology, Department of Humanity and Social Science at IIT Kharagpur. He has also been a visiting faculty abroad at Harvard University, USA 2003 and Kuso University, Japan in 1997 and 2010 to 2011. He has been awarded with various awards, Doctorate of Science in 2015, National Associate of Medical Science 2011, Science Communication Award 2008, Technology Spin-off Award 2007, Scientist of the Year Award 2006, Young Scientist Award ISCA 1968, only the name of few. He specialized in the area of behavioral neuroscience, cognitive science. He has supervised 26 doctorates and 3 postdoctoral research theses and has been a part of 225 national and international conferences. So your presence with us is a refulgence and a source of inspiration for the students present here. Now I request Sir to take forward the session.
Yeah, without Shalini, how many of you are there? I see around 9 or 10 people. If you
Yes,
like,
sir.
I can wait for some time. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yesterday, I found around 30 people. But if people could not join, I am ready to join. I am ready to wait. जैसे बोलोगे मैं वैसे ही करूँगा.
So it's up to you. You can start or you can wait.
जो लोग बीच में आएंगे वो नहीं समझ पाएंगे.
So you can start.
I should start?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let me first share my screen. ये बताओ शालिनी दिखाई दे रहा है स्क्रीन?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Okay. तो मैं तुमको रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ बीच बीच में हम पूछेंगे कि whether there is any technical glitches or not. So you have to respond to that. Okay?
Okay, sir.
This could be your job as the monitor for this group. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Well, very good morning to all of you. Am I clearly audible, Shalini?
Good morning, sir. And yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. So yesterday I had the opportunity to talk to you about the guiding philosophies behind doing any kind of research. It may be a classroom practical, it may be a interventionary project, it may be PhD, it may be a small paperwork for publication, anything. So the basic idea behind talking to all of you yesterday was to let you know that how researches are done. Now, students in particular, including faculties like us, are often confused about where to start, कहाँ से शुरू करें. So, entire session was devoted to how to conduct research. Now, today's session is to understand about a particular construct in behavioral science, which is attitude. First of all, we need to know, हमें ये जानना चाहिए कि why attitude is so important. कहीं हम मेजर तो करते नहीं है रिक्रूटमेंट के लिए. पूरे हिंदुस्तान में wherever you go, you will find that selections, recruitments are all done based on aptitude test or achievement test. Nowhere it is done on attitude test. तो क्वेश्चन ये उठता है कि is attitude at all important? The answer is that getting a job requires aptitude, but sustaining in a job requires attitude. जॉब पाने के लिए हमारी एप्टीट्यूड की जरूरत है, इंटेलिजेंस की जरूरत है, कैपेबिलिटी की जरूरत है. पर जॉब में अगर रहना है, सपोज आई हैव एंटर्ड इनटू अ जॉब or I have entered into an organization, whether I would be able to sustain effectively with some degree of job satisfaction or not depends on my attitude. Therefore, attitude measurement is mostly done at a slightly higher level, not at the entry level. And most HR people are confused कि attitude को measure कैसे करें. People generally confuse between attitude and other kinds of mental constructs or constructs within mind. In a layman term, हम लोग हमेशा कहते हैं इनकी mindset गलत है और इनकी attitude अच्छा है. तो attitude, mindset, there are a lot of terms we use actually in daily life. Let me tell you, mindset is not really a scientific construct. Attitude is a scientific construct. Now, we must understand in the beginning what is the difference between a concept and a construct. Mindset is a concept. हम कहते हैं इनकी mindset खराब है. Mindset is a concept. But when a scientific construct is advanced, then concept is elevated to construct. Construct means the scientifically based concept which can be measured. So if I cannot measure a concept, then it cannot be a construct. So construct has certain variables, and variables means that which varies, and anything that varies objectively or subjectively, we should be able to measure it. Therefore, a scientific construct means, like attitude means, we should be able to measure attitude. But if I simply say that his attitude is bad, now bad or good is not a kind of measurement that we are simply looking for. That's a layman's term. Therefore, it's very important for all of us to understand how attitude can be measured. How aptitude can be measured, there are so many tests available throughout the world. You look into internet, you will get so many aptitude tests. You go abroad, you have to sit for GRE, is an aptitude test. Go for a management degree, you have to sit for GMAT. It's an aptitude test. So more often, we get an entry into an organization with aptitude, but sustain in an organization effectively with an attitude. Therefore, I repeat, measurement of attitude is so important. So, the question in any organization, people often ask this question, that how to understand attitude of others. मैं कैसे जानूं किसी का attitude के बारे में? Is there a way to do that? Is there a relation between attitude and aptitude? Well, it is possible that we have people who have got good attitude, bad aptitude, or it's also possible that they have got good aptitude, bad attitude. Now we all know, किसी भी organization में, if people have got good aptitude but bad attitude, they will spoil the organization. But if a person has got good attitude, even if he or she doesn't have good aptitude, he or she would be able to retain himself effectively within the organization for a very long period. So, apparently, दोनों के बीच में कोई relation तो है नहीं, but there are two different constructs and they can be measured separately. जब हम aptitude को measure करते हैं, तब हम इसे test कहते हैं. और जब हम attitude को measure करते हैं, तब उसे हम scale कहते हैं. I'll talk about the difference between test and scale slightly later. The third common concern in any organization is why persons develop negative attitude. Some people we find are having positive attitude. Some people always have got negative attitude. कुछ भी देखो, they find fault in it. और कुछ लोग ऐसे भी हैं, even after failure, even after difficulties, they see a lot of good things in it. So for a person with good aptitude or positive aptitude, they do not have bad days. They have only bad moments. They say that every day is a good day. I may have some bad moments. But for people with negative attitude, they see everything negatively. Everything negatively. So why people develop negative attitude? How can I measure whether a person has got good aptitude or a good attitude or negative attitude? How to overcome the impact of negativity? क्योंकि हमें पता है कि अगर किसी को good attitude है और positivity है, तो they will help in production. They will build good relationship amongst the colleagues. But if somebody has got negativity, they may be performing very well. Well, they will break the group. They will have not a good relation with their colleagues. So it's important that we need to overcome such kind of negativity. But that's possible only when you get to know about somebody's negativity. The negativity या attitude तो दिखता नहीं है ना. Attitude को judge करना पड़ता है. Attitude को measure करना पड़ता है. So the final question is, how can attitude be tested in a workplace? या हमें अगर किसी भी organization में, चाहे स्कूल हो, चाहे वो इंडस्ट्री हो, चाहे वो कम्युनिटी हो, चाहे वो फैमिली हो, कहीं भी आपको एटीट्यूड को अगर टेस्ट करना है तो हमें तरीका जाननी चाहिए. वी मस्ट नो हाउ इट कैन बी मेजर्ड. जनरली आप वर्क प्लेस में जाओगे, किसी भी वर्क प्लेस में, you will find that lot of misconceptions are there because of wrong attitude. Misconceptions generate out of bad attitude. For example, हमें लगता है people who disagree have bad attitude. Misconception. People who agree can have bad attitude. Can have, not always. But people who disagree may not have bad attitude. They disagree for technical reasons. They are disagreeing due to issue-based matter, not a person-based matter. So it's a wrong conception, and we develop such attitude amongst ourselves. That somebody is always disagreeing with me, it means he has got negative attitude. Like we believe that people who are procrastinating, they are generally lazy people. Procrastinating people means those who always say कि चलो ये काम हम कल कर लेंगे, परसों कर लेंगे. It's called procrastination. So people think that probably procrastination is something which only lazy people have. Not necessarily. Some people who procrastinate due to their order of priority, what to do. People develop bad attitude because they believe that immediate boss may be the problem. आप जिनके साथ रोज काम करते हो, उनके साथ attitudinal differences हमेशा होता रहता है. Most people say that हमारा super boss तो बहुत सही है, chief executive तो बहुत बढ़िया है, but immediate boss जो है हमेशा तंग करते हैं, because they are always in touch with you. So it's a wrong conception. If you are staying with someone for a long time, there would be differences of opinions. Doesn't mean they have got wrong attitude. Likewise, those who are working from distance, like pandemic में हमने देखा है कि बहुत लोग remote places से work करते हैं. और people believe that remote places से work अगर कोई करें तो उनका performance अच्छा नहीं रहेगा. कोई अगर long hours तक ऑफिस में रह रहे हैं, 5 बजे छुट्टी हो जाती है, मगर 8 बजे तक रह रहे हैं, they are hard working people. Not necessarily. जो काम 8 घंटे में नहीं पॉसिबल है, वो 12 घंटे में भी पॉसिबल नहीं हो पाएगा. So there are several misconceptions due to our wrong attitude and misconceptions at workplace. I gave you only some examples. Now let me enter into its scientific status. Attitude is basically a perceptual orientation and a sort of response readiness. It's a kind of behavior that is already decided into my mental setup, that given a particular condition, I will behave in this way. For example, if I see my boss who is very critical, I'll not smile at him. It's a response readiness. So, attitude is something where you tend to see something the way you want to see rather than what it actually is. मैं उसी तरह से देखता हूं जिस तरह से मैं देखना चाहता हूं. That's called perceptual orientation and response readiness. That is, हमारे पास response करने के लिए set of alternatives already है and उसी में से हमें respond करनी है. I'm not going to respond the way situation demands. I'll respond the way I feel for it. So feeling is a component, and the way I believe that the situation is like this. So belief is very important. So what I perceive and how I perceive are two different things. Actually, belief works as a filter between what you see and how you see. And from belief, you generate the feeling that this man could be bad, this man could be good. I mean, you generate a feeling. And because of the combination of belief and feeling, you develop a behavioral intention that मैं कैसे इनके साथ बर्ताव करूं या behave करूं. So attitude has a component, three components: a component of perception, a component of feeling, and a component of belief, which amalgamate into a sort of behavior. कभी-कभी किताब में इसको ABC मॉडल भी कहते हैं. A माने affect or feeling, B माने behavior, and C माने cognition. Now, belief is a mental state where you cognitively believe that certain premises are true. So it has got a cognitive component. तो इसलिए कभी-कभी हम लोग कहते हैं belief may be a thinking error. So belief has a cognitive component, feeling has an affective component, and behavior is an action component. So A, B, C, affect, behavior, and cognition. Some books refer attitude like this. But whatever be the way you define it, it's a kind of response readiness. And this is important for all of us because this attitude is reasonably enduring. It's just not a temporary phase. ये खाली context पे depend नहीं करता है. कभी-कभी तो attitude context invariant हो जाता है. जैसे हमारी अगर कोई negative attitude है, तो situation कितना भी अच्छा हो, आप इसे negatively ही देखते हैं. कोई आपको praise भी कर दे, तो आपको लगता है ये मेरे को praise इसलिए कर रहे हैं क्योंकि इनको कोई motive है, मेरे से कोई काम लेनी है. So they are reasonably enduring and just not a temporary state. The problem with attitude is that they are always evaluative. They will go in terms of good or bad, positive or negative. I mean, whatever be the way, they are always polarized. Very difficult to have a person who has got a differential attitude. Differential attitude के मतलब ये होता है कि आप कभी पॉजिटिव चीजों को भी देखते हो, नेगेटिव को भी देखते हो, डिफरेंशियली देखते हो, सिचुएशन पे निर्भर करते हो. तो हम लोग इसलिए कहते हैं कि एटीट्यूड डिपेंड्स ऑन कॉन्टेक्स्ट, कंटेंट एंड इंटेंट. कॉन्टेक्स्ट भी इंपॉर्टेंट है, आपका मेंटल सेट और एटीट्यूड भी इंपॉर्टेंट है, विच इज कंटेंट, एंड योर इंटेंट. आप चाहते क्या हो उस पर भी निर्भर करता है. So attitudes are necessarily evaluative or affective. Shalini, am I clear? Could you listen to me?
Yes, sir. It was clear.
Okay. Now, how do we develop attitude, beliefs, and values? Now, this slide is very easy to understand. I do not want to go in great detail about it. I mean, attitude depends on, past experience. आपकी memories कैसी हैं? कुछ लोग ऐसे हैं कि if they have got bad memories, they develop negative attitude. Some people have got good memories, they develop positive attitude. So memory or past experience पे निर्भर करता है. But more important to past experience is preconception. आपने इम्प्रेशन कैसे डेवलप किया, उससे निष्कर्ष क्या निकाला, आपका बिलीफ सिस्टम कैसे डेवलप कर गया. कि हम अगर ये कहते हैं कि पीपल फ्रॉम ए पर्टिकुलर स्टेट आर ऑलवेज बैड, इट्स अ बिलीफ सिस्टम. यू डेवलप ए नेगेटिव एटीट्यूड टुवर्ड्स देम. नाउ हाउ डिड आई डेवलप दिस प्रीकंसेप्शन? सो दिस preconception is a very important thing because preconception does not always depend on your past experience. हम उस स्टेट में कभी गए ही नहीं, पर हमारा एक आइडिया डेवलप कर गया कि people belong to that state and not good. So preconception can be formed by many inputs, and how they combine depends on what kind of prejudices and specific influences I have. हो सकता है मैं 4-5 दोस्त से मिल लिए, सबने यही कहा कि उस स्टेट से जो लोग आते हैं वो गलत होते हैं. जैसे अमेरिका में हमने देखा है, लोग कहते हैं जो ब्लैक एरिया से आते हैं दे आर जनरली बैड, जो व्हाइट से आते हैं, व्हाइट एरिया से आते हैं, दे आर जनरली गुड. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है, पर लोग कहते हैं बिकॉज दे लिसन टू इट, नॉट ऑलवेज फेस इट. आई हैव नेवर फेस्ड any crime with any black people, but I often listen about it. I often get this input from news. I mean, some opinions, comments, attitude of the people. So your specific influences may depend on your managers, on your supervisors, on your work group, peer group, so on and so forth. Your attitude also depends on your organizational identity. The extent to which people have pride in working for their organization. The person who is in that organization may be in a group D level, at the lowest level of the hierarchy, but they may take pride in it. So attitude towards the organization depends on how much identity we have and what kind of defense I always take whenever I face some kind of difficulties. Defense matlab ki the moment I face a problem, I come out with a solution which is imaginary. For example, I came late in the organization and I said I could not get any transport today to reach my office. It's a defense. I could have come out a little early, but I didn't do that. I took a defense. Now, if you take defense on a regular basis, then what happens? This attitude becomes internalized. कहीं भी जाते हो, आप अगर लेट होते हो, तो आप हमेशा कोई बहाना लेते हो. Defense is nothing but bahana, and that becomes part of your individual system. So attitude develops on very many factors, not limited to this. So when we analyze attitude, try to measure it. We try to measure it keeping all these things into account. Now we come to the measurement of attitude. Attitude can be measured in various ways. Not that we will measure attitude only through scaling technique. Though we have some emphasis on scaling, how it is done, but you must know what are the different ways attitudes are measured. My idea of talking to you today is not to tell you how a scale is developed. I mean, एक scale को कैसे develop किया जा सकता है, उसके बारे में books बहुत हैं, किताब बहुत हैं, इंटरनेट में भरा पड़ा हुआ है. अगर हम दोबारा उस चीज को बताना चाहें तो उसका कोई मतलब नहीं निकलता है. पर कोई भी किताब अगर उठा लो एटीट्यूड मेजरमेंट के, तो स्केलिंग के लिए आपको अलग बुक्स मिलेंगे, सिचुएशन जजमेंट टेस्ट के लिए अलग मिलेंगे, बायोलॉजिकल मेजर्स के लिए अलग अलग बुक्स मिलेंगे, बिहेवियोमेट्री के लिए, बिहेवियर सिग्नेचर एनालिसिस के लिए अलग अलग बुक मिलेंगे. आई मीन, you will not get a consolidated idea about what are the different ways measurement of attitude is possible. So my idea to talk to you today is to tell you about the different ways attitude could be measured. And then it depends on your research problem or program or thesis or project, whatever be the way, which technique you are going to employ depending upon the kind of logistics available with you. Yesterday, we talked about how researches are to be done. We talked about the heuristics, logistics, tactics, statistics, and so on and so forth. So it depends on the logistics. So when you try to measure attitude, you should have the tool. Suppose you have decided about a tool and the tool is not available with you, then what do? Therefore, it's important to understand, in addition to developing the research objective, what are the tools which are available with you, and accordingly you can actually measure attitude. If the tools are not available, you can even develop a tool, and that's possible. Many theses are conducted by developing a tool. But my emphasis today in this talk, because in 1.5 hours I cannot talk about everything, my idea is to tell you about what are the different ways measurements can be done. Now, scaling technique is a technique, and when we talk about a scale, we need to understand first what is the difference between a test and a scale. Many of us do not understand what is the difference between experiment and test. Now, experiments, yesterday I talked to you that more of a laboratory setup where cause and effect relationship can be tested by controlling all extraneous variables. So the purpose of doing an experiment is to generalize an event. But the purpose of doing a test is to see whether the two individuals differ in their ability or not. Experiment is to see the generality, test is to see the specificity. If I go for a blood test, I'll see what is my blood sugar. But if I do an experiment on blood sugar, I'll see what is the range of blood sugar that I can call as normal blood sugar. So experiment is done for generality, test is done for specificity. But then you must also understand what is the difference between a test and a scale. You must have heard about aptitude test. But attitude scale, why do we use two different terms? The reason being that test is done to examine someone's ability. A scale is done to understand somebody's attitude, opinions, belief, intentions, and there is no right or wrong response. In test, there is a right or wrong response. In scale, there are no right or wrong response. Now, when you understand the difference between test and scale, you have to also understand the difference between psychophysical scale and psychological scale. When we try to measure attitude, we measure psychological scale. We do not measure psychophysical scale. Now, what is the difference between these two? The psychophysical scale is a scale where a psychological judgment is verified on a physical scale. That is, हमें किसी ने कहा कि इस टेबल को नाप दो, बता दो लेंथ क्या है. मैंने कहा 4 फीट है, but actually it is 4 फीट 4 इंच है. तो मैंने अंडर एस्टिमेट किया. तो हमारा जो साइकोलॉजिकल जजमेंट है, हम फिजिकल स्केल में उसको इवैल्यूएट कर सकते हैं. पर जब हम साइकोलॉजिकल स्केलिंग की बात करते हैं, it means when a psychological judgment is evaluated on a psychological scale. The scale may be a 3-point scale, a 5-point scale, a 7-point scale, a 10-point scale, whatever be there. I have created a psychological scale and the judgment is evaluated against a psychological scale. So that is called psychological scaling. These differences are crucial for anybody to understand. And then attitude measurement is not limited to scaling techniques like self-report or peer report. I can report my attitude towards a particular event or object. Others can also report my attitude on a set of questionnaire. At times, we use situation judgment test because the self-report or peer report are generally biased reports. Depends upon social desirability. Like किसी भी ऑफिस में आप जाओ, the confidential assessment whatever by the year end it is done about a particular employee, if I have got good relation, I will always give better report, even if the person is not performing well. So they are subjected to some kind of biasness. To avoid such biasness, at times we use situation judgment test, in which there is no correct or incorrect answer. We at times use it as a semi-projective test, where you judge a situation without knowing you are judging for yourself. Many people use sentence completion test like projective test. Many people use picture assortment test as a projective test to understand somebody's attitude. All these are possible, which are basically projective tests. Then there is a set of tests which is called behaviometry. Behaviometry is not psychometry. Behaviometry actually joins hand with computer science. The behavior signature analysis is done. You talk to me, I don't want to listen what you have talked to. Your slices of behavior can be captured in a camera, and that can be analyzed and correlated with a particular attitude scale. And from there, I can infer what kind of attitude you have. For example, I tell you, how are you? And you have started frowning. The frown that you have, it tells me that you don't like me or like my statement. But you didn't say anything. You only behaved in certain manner. If I analyze those kind of behavior, it becomes behaviometry. And I'll give you several examples of behaviometry today. But I'll not talk about physiological measures, because yesterday I could gather that people are not belonging to neurosciences. So how functional magnetic resonance imaging is done to understand attitude, or how electroencephalography is done to measure attitude, may not be very relevant at your level. Therefore, I would concentrate on the top three: scaling, situation judgment test, and behaviometry. Now, when we talk about attitude scales, in literature, there are many types of attitude scales available. Now, most of these scales are based on the scaling technique. Before I try to explain this slide, you have to first understand what do I mean by scaling. I'll come back to this slide later on. First, you try to understand what do I understand by levels of measurement. There are 4 types of scales available. I'm sure you know about all these things: nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale, and ratio scale. Nominal scale is a scale which is at the lowest level of any kind of scale. And ratio scale is a scale which is the highest level of any measurement device. All physical sciences depend on ratio scale. In psychological sciences or social sciences, we do not use ratio scale. Rarely we do. Ratio scale is a scale which we generally make use of in order to measure length, weight, anything of that sort. I'll come to that, but let us first try to understand what is the lowest level. Lowest level is nominal. That is, you assign a value, but that value has got nothing to do with the object or the person. For example, Sachin Tendulkar has a jersey number 10. Doesn't mean Sachin Tendulkar is a poor player. His jersey number is 10 is only a nominal scale. In order to differentiate Sachin Tendulkar from all other test cricketers that we have in the team. So pass and fail is basically nominal, where the idea is to simply dichotomize or simply identify an object. The higher level to nominal scale is something called ordinal scale, where we do not retain only by naming the variable, we also order them. We don't say pass or fail, we also say somebody is first, somebody is second, somebody is third. So when we use the order terms of a particular capacity or capability or a particular parameter, we call it ordinal scale. Almost all attitude scales are based on ordinal scale. That is, they use rating or ranking techniques in order to explicitly talk about their attitude. So it's important to understand that we use ordinal scale. But suppose in a class I know first boy, second boy, and third boy, or first girl, second girl, and third girl. Higher level to ordinal level is called interval scale. Interval scale means is a scale where there is no 0 point, but the difference between first and second, second and third, they can be evaluated in terms of a proportion. That is, the first boy got 100 out of 100, second boy got 90 out of 100, and third boy got 89 out of 100. So the difference between first boy and second boy is 10 interval, but the difference between second boy and third boy is 1 interval. So interval scale is a higher level of scale. And we have several psychological scale based on interval scale. But when we talk about a ratio scale has got a theoretical 0. Theoretical 0 means that is absolute absence. It can accommodate an absolute 0. So all physical scales are based on ratio scale. I have given several examples in this slide. You can use that example, see that at a later point of time. Now, I come back to my attitude scales. As I said, almost all attitude scales are based on ordinal scale. Either they are comparative basis, that is, you compare between one another, like paired comparison. I give you 2, you have to select 1. You compare between these 2 and then select 1. Or on a non-comparative scale, that is, I give you a scale from approval to high agreement to low agreement on a 5-point scale. You can do a rating. So when we do ranking, we have comparative scales. But when we have got a rating, we have got non-comparative scales. So non-comparative scales means you do not compare that statement or that particular object with another statement or another object. So scaling techniques are several based on comparative scales, which is rank order. You compare between one another and then rank order, or do pair comparison, or you do a rating. Three measurement devices are important to understand. Under mostly the attitude scales that we use are on non-comparative scales. Like the Thurston's method is based on non-comparative, continuous scaling method. Like Likert scale, semantic differential scale, Staples technique, all are based on non-comparative scales, continuous scale or itemized rating scale. Only one technique I will be referring to you, which is comparative, because ranking, we all know, is a Q-sort technique. So I'll quickly let you know about this technique, and then you can use it, and if you want to develop it, you can develop it accordingly. First technique is called Thurston scale. The Thurston scale is a scale Actually, Thurston is the first person who came out with an attitude scale, 1928. And his view was that we can judge somebody's attitude on a equal appearing intervals, like agree, disagree. Agree is 1, disagree is 5. There is nothing in between. the intermediate values are not known to the subject. So suppose I have given you an example. I wanted to know whether euthanasia is accepted in a country or not. A lot of people have been doing in Europe. I mean, it's now under court's jurisdiction, but government wants to know what is the attitude of the people towards euthanasia. Suppose somebody is brain dead, or somebody is paraplegic, totally cannot move his hand even, whether he or she has the right to die or not. So government want most of the European countries, they use this thirst and skill with these items. The item is a person with a terminal disease or illness has the right to decide to die. आपको 5 point में इसे rate करनी है. So 4.15, it means he has, I mean, if 5 is the agreement and 1 is the disagreement, I don't know, I mean, it's just a speculation. Whatever be the score, you can judge that particular item. You can judge. Inducing death for merciful reason is wrong. You can have an opposite kind of item. कि ठीक है, एक reason तो है, but जीवन तो हमने नहीं दिया, किसी और ने दिया है. Do I have the right to take it away? So questions of that sorts are given, like euthanasia gives a person a chance to die with dignity. Otherwise, you will live but without a quality of life. Is it good as well? इसमें कोई right or wrong answer नहीं है. आप खाली opinions जानना चाहते हो, attitude जानना चाहते हो. You can give a question. Taking of human life is wrong, no matter what the circumstances. So you give two versions of the same concept in order to understand what is people's attitude. So this method is called equal appearing interval. इसके बाद Likert आए. Likert scale is called summated rating scale. Likert ने क्या किया? Likert says that, well, I will not define only the two anchors of agree or disagree. I will define each of these units within that scale, rating scale, 1 to 5. Strongly disagree, strong, somewhat disagree, neutral, somewhat agree, strongly agree. So a Likert scale is also a continuum, but the categorization within the continuum is built. Thurston scale में आपके पास ये लिबर्टी है कि आप उसको कहीं भी डालें आपके हिसाब से. So it becomes a little complex when you make an analysis of it. When you create a category out of Thurston scale, it's slightly more complex. But Likert scale में क्या है? आप summated rating से आपको पता चल जाता है immediately कि आपकी attitude क्या है. So I feel good about my job. Strongly agree to strongly disagree. You can have n number of questions to learn about a person's attitude. So Likert scale is called summated rating. The Thurston scale is called method of equal appearing interval. A third method is called Q-short technique. Q-short technique में आप क्या करते हो? स्टीफनसन ने 1953 में इस टेक्निक को अपनाया. I have given you an example for your understanding. इसमें आपको शॉर्टिंग करनी होती है. I mean, शॉर्टिंग का बेसिक कैटेगरी 3 कैटेगरी है. ये बीच वाला जो है न्यूट्रल कैटेगरी है, जो ब्लू है मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट कैटेगरी है फॉर मी, एंड जो रेडिश है लीस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर मी एज कैटेगरी. तो आपको बहुत सारे स्मॉल स्टेटमेंट्स दी जाती हैं. पहले मैं आपको समझा दूं, देन प्रोबब्ली यू विल अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट Q-short टेक्निक इज. एक डेंटिस्ट ने एक सर्वे किया है कि इसे कहते हैं ब्रेस, कि अगर बच्चों का दांत अगर ठीक नहीं है और ऑर्डर में नहीं है, क्या इसको करना चाहिए बाय यूजिंग ब्रेस. नाउ डेंटिस्ट वांटेड टू नो व्हाट इज पीपल्स एटीट्यूड टुवर्ड्स ब्रेसिंग. नाउ व्हाट डू आई वांट माय चाइल्ड टू हैव ब्रेसेस, व्हाई डू आई वांट. तो डेंटिस्ट ने क्या किया, बहुत सारा स्मॉल स्टेटमेंट्स जो है इन्होंने ये 11 पॉइंट में इसको डिवाइड करने के लिए दिया. और नॉट 11 पॉइंट, ये देखो बीच में 3 पॉइंट है, इधर 4 पॉइंट है, इधर 4 पॉइंट है, तो 4 4 8 8 3 11 पॉइंट है, सॉरी 11 पॉइंट है। अब इसमें बीच वाला जो है पॉइंट है, आप कोई पोलैरिटी में नहीं जाते हो, लेस इंपॉर्टेंट और मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट। आप खाली जानना चाहते हो कि व्हाई ब्रेसिंग इज इंपॉर्टेंट। तो आपको क्या करना है, ये जो स्टेटमेंट्स हैं, ये स्टेटमेंट को आपको किसी बॉक्स में डालनी है। ये जितना स्टेटमेंट लिखा हुआ है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल मेक चाइल्ड प्राउड ऑफ देयर टीथ, हम इसलिए ब्रेसिंग चाहते हैं। हम इस तरह के स्टेटमेंट देते हैं, बेटर व्हेन यंग एंड ग्रोइंग, जब बच्चा छोटा हो उस समय अगर ब्रेसिंग कर दिया जाए तो बेहतर होगा, दैट इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट। सो डेंटिस्ट ये जानना चाहता है कि ब्रेसिंग पेरेंट्स कब चाहते हैं। पर कुछ लोग ये लिखते हैं लीस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर कि आई विश माय पेरेंट्स मेड मी हैव ब्रेसेस इज लीस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर मी। तो आपका जो एटीट्यूड है टुवर्ड्स ब्रेस, माने डॉक्टर ये जानना चाहता है पेरेंट्स से कि आपके बच्चों को अगर ये प्रॉब्लम है दांत की अलाइनमेंट में, आप ब्रेसिंग चाहते हो कि नहीं, एटीट्यूड क्या है। तो स्टेटमेंट्स बहुत सारे लिखे जाते हैं और उन स्टेटमेंट को पेशेंट पार्टी को बोला जाता है कि ये स्टेटमेंट आप किस कैटेगरी में डालोगे, मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट कैटेगरी में या लीस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट कैटेगरी में। पूरे स्टडी सपोज 200-300 स्टडी सब्जेक्ट के ऊपर स्टडी करने के बाद आप एक क्यू शॉर्ट स्केल बनाते हो और उस स्केल में आप देखते हो कि व्हाट इज मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर। द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर इज फ्यूचर प्रॉब्लम्स मे बी अवर्टेड। यदि हम इसको ठीक ना करें, हो सकता है बाद में जाके हमें प्रॉब्लम हो जाए। और जो लीस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट है, people may not like me, that's the least important factor। तो डॉक्टर हमेशा पेशेंट पार्टी के बारे में और पेशेंट पार्टी के जो एटीट्यूड है इसे जानने के लिए ये क्यू शॉर्ट टेक्निक करते हैं। और क्यू शॉर्ट टेक्निक पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज भी करते रहते हैं, सोशियोलॉजिकल स्टडीज में भी होता रहता है। एंड ये शॉर्ट डिस्क्रिप्टिव स्टेटमेंट्स आपको बनाने होते हैं और सब्जेक्ट को उसे डिफरेंट ब्लॉक्स में डालना होता है, शॉर्टिंग करनी होती है, तो इसे क्यू शॉर्ट टेक्निक कहते हैं। अल्टीमेटली आप इसको एनालाइज करके देखते हो which factors are more important for an attitude, which factors are less important. Shalini, am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The next technique is called semantic differential scale. Osgood, Susie, and Tenenbaum, 3 people in 1957, they suggested another kind of scale. और more often psychological, sociological, behavioral sciences में हम लोग semantic differential scales use करते हैं। Semantic differential means they are polar opposites in terms of the adjectives. For example, kind versus unkind, helpful versus unhelpful, patient versus impatient, calm versus angry, friendly versus threatening, and you are trying to judge somebody based on these two semantic differential scale. Osgood ने ये सोचा कि एटीट्यूड को 3 तरह से हम 3 फैक्टर के थ्रू हम इवैल्यूएट कर सकते हैं, गुड और बैड, स्ट्रॉन्ग एंड वीक, एक्टिव एंड पैसिव। सो every semantic differential scale is based on 3 different dimensions: good and bad, strong and weak, and active and passive. So आप डायमेंशन को डिसाइड करते हो, जो पॉजिटिव डायमेंशन है उसे पॉजिटिव स्कोर देते हो, जो नेगेटिव डायमेंशन है उसको नेगेटिव डायमेंशन देते हो, और बीच में न्यूट्रल पॉइंट्स है। आपको जांच करना होता है एक पर्टिकुलर इंडिविजुअल को या एक पर्टिकुलर ऑब्जेक्ट को ऑन a semantic differential scale. For example, your boss is kind or unkind. You have said kind. Your boss is helpful or unhelpful. He is kind but not helpful. Your boss is patient or impatient. He is patient. Your boss is calm or angry. He is calm. Your boss is friendly and threatening. He is not friendly, he is threatening. So I can create a profile of my boss based on my semantic differential scale. So this tells about my attitude or opinion. One of the problems of the attitude scales that we have seen everywhere is the middle category response. More often, आप अपना जो attitude को है explain नहीं करना चाहते हो तो आप middle category में concentrate करते हो. More often, इधर का भी नहीं, उधर का भी नहीं. So, in order to avoid such problem, Staple has come out with a solution. Staple says that there is no neutral category. आपको जज करनी है 10 point में +5 to -5 on a particular parameter. For example, and there is no 0 point. You have got high food quality. Food quality plane में जब अब रहे flight में, so whether the food quality is good or not, you said yes, food quality was good. But then what was the crew service? So poor crew service you have given +3 means crew service was not good. आप अगर poor crew service में -4 देते, it means crew service was also good, food was also good. But here you understand that food quality was good, but crew service was not good. So it's a scale comprised of 10 categories ranging from -5 to +5 without any neutral point. That's also a way you can measure attitude. Then there is a scale, attitude scale, which is called Guttman scale. Guttman scale is a scale which is like a Likert type scale. इसमें खासियत ये है कि आप को जो items दी जाती हैं attitude जानने के लिए, that has got certain hierarchy. Hierarchy का मतलब ये है कि if you have a positive attitude towards an item which is high up in the hierarchy, it means you are automatically agreeing all items lower than that item. मैं पहले example दे दूं, फिर इसके बाद आप समझोगे. For example, would you marry a refugee? Suppose आप कहते हो कि no, I don't want to marry a refugee. Would you accept a refugee as a close friend? No, I don't want a refugee as a close friend. Do you find refugees living in your neighborhood acceptable? No, I don't want to find a refugee in my neighborhood. Should refugees be allowed to live in the same neighborhood as others? Here you say that हमें कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Yes. It means on all three, on the top of it, you had said no, and then there is a hierarchy where your attitude says that, well, if they stay like other jhuppi jhopdi, I have got no problem, but they should not be in my neighborhood. उल्टा समझ लो. Suppose, would you marry a refugee? Yes, I would marry a refugee. तो अगर आप कहते हो would you marry a refugee, you will automatically agree that would you accept a refugee as a close friend? And naturally, if I want to marry a refugee, I would definitely accept a refugee as a close friend as well. Then do you find refugees living in your neighborhood acceptable? I should not have any problem because I am marrying a refugee. It means if you have got yes in the first item, you are automatically yes in the lower item. So we create a graph out of it. That's why it is called a scaleogram analysis, a cumulative scaling. And Guttman has actually very carefully developed this scale where the construction of item is difficult in the sense that you have to create a specific hierarchy in order to understand where lies your threshold of the particular attitude. आप रिफ्यूजी को अलाउ करते हो किसी और के संग रहने के लिए, पर आप नेबरहुड में अलाउ नहीं करते हो, क्लोज फ्रेंड के हिसाब से अलाउ नहीं करते हो, और मैरी करना तो दूर की बात है. So this is an example of Guttman scale where those who agree with a more extreme test item would also agree with all fewer extreme items that preceded it. That's the beauty of the Guttman scale. So you can use different kinds of scale I mean, in the understanding or measurement of attitude. But the problem, I mean, the measurement technique is, I mean, as I said, these are all based on psychological scaling. The statistical treatment of the data is very important in attitude scale. So either we do factor analysis or we do multidimensional scaling with distance analysis. So we generally transform data into some kind of distances represented in a multidimensional space. Because when I form an attitude, I told you in the beginning, it may be due to some factor as prejudice, due to some factor my past experience, due to my belief system, whatever be the thing, I try to understand the similarities of my answer, that is response readiness towards a given parameter in such a manner so that I understand what are the factors that may be considered orthogonal, not so similar to each other, with an ultimate aim to understand the factors that constitute an attitude. Suppose if I have got a good attitude, resilience could be one factor for me, compassion could be one factor for me, gratitude could be one factor for me, empathy could be one factor for me. So these factors I try to identify based on an attitude scale. That if I have got a positive attitude, I identified through similarity analysis. Similarity analysis means the purpose is to understand the dissimilarity amongst the items which measure different components. That is, gratitude has got some items, compassion has got certain items, empathy has got certain items. Sympathy has got certain items, and I try to understand what are the constituent factors which are orthogonal to each other, contribute ultimately to the composition of a particular attitude, which may be a good attitude, which may be a bad attitude. For negative attitude, I may be having anxiety, I may be having neuroticism, I may be having some other belief system, which is wrong belief, which contribute to my attitude. So after administering the scale, we treat the data on multidimensional scaling or some kind of factor analysis in order to understand what are the few factors which ultimately constitute a particular attitude. Those who are doing this assessment, they understand that there is a challenge in scale development. The scale developments like the Guttman scale, as I just said, is a difficult thing. It's not a very easy thing. It appears very easy, but it's a very difficult thing to construct attitude scale. Social desirability is a problem. You always give response what you want to see rather than what it actually is. Our response by saying that jaise aap chahte ho, not on the basis of actual fact. Some people even do faking. That is, they don't bother social desirability. They just tick certain responses because it consumes time. Computer is another problem, that in computerized attitude scales, like whenever you go to any airline, use any airline, they send you a feedback form. And how much time we spend for that? I think computerized testing has its own problem. There are ethical issues also. My personal judgment is actually seen by others. There are several pitfalls. Pitfalls means some people believe that, oh, this is very easy to develop. I mean, illusory expertise. Some people find it, develop a prediction urge. Yeah, I have tested my employees' attitude and I can tell what they will be doing. So there are a lot of pitfalls in attitude scaling through subjective methods. That is a prediction urge, through illusory expertise, biases, errors. For that reason, there are certain alternatives to psychometry. One such method is called situation judgment test. आप इसमें there is no right or wrong response. You judge a situation and tell me which response you are interested in. For example, you find out that the promotion you were hoping for was given to someone else. किसी और को दे दिया गया. अब ये 4 response है. Please go through. I'll pause a bit and then you will understand the beauty of the test. Look, there are many responses possible. You have to choose one response. Now, which response you have chosen? Your attitude could be understood based on situation judgment test. What kind of person you are. I give you another example. You are in a meeting when a colleague takes credit for the work you have done. What do? किसी एक मीटिंग में आप है, काम आपने किया तो क्रेडिट किसी और ने ले लिया, तो आप क्या करोगे उस मीटिंग में सबके सामने? तो 4 रेस्पॉन्सेस हैं. अब देखो कौन सा रेस्पॉन्स आपको अच्छा लगेगा. Shalini, it is visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay.
The last response.
Oh, good.
So I think B1.
Shalini, your voice is breaking actually.
So B.
B.
Now, yes, sir.
Okay. But there is no right or wrong response. The beauty of the test is that you understand the attitude through certain qualitative analysis by giving a fictitious context, and in which you never get to understand that you are responding for yourself. It's a sort of semi-projective test. To those who are in the field of behavioral science, they will understand that we test somebody's attitude also through sentence completion tests. Whenever I face an angry man, dash, 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 what you will do is not written there. You have to fill in that sentence. So when you fill in the sentence, I get to know about your attitude. It's called a projective test. But situation judgment test is not a projective test. It's a semi-projective test. Because in projective test, the subjects are not aware of the fact that they are being tested. Here, we call it is a semi-projective test in situation judgment test. That is, subject understands that he is making a judgment, but more often they don't realize that their attitude can be tested through this situation judgment test. Then I come to something called behavior signature analysis. As I said, scaling technique, situation judgment test, sentence completion test, picture sorting test. I mean, they are all subjective tests. You judge the way you feel, and you never know whether the real response is coming out of you or not. So your attitude is often understood by your behavior. You do not have to say anything. आपको कुछ बोलने की जरूरत नहीं है. आपका चेहरा ही काफी है. How you respond to your face. जैसे हमारे फेस पे जो है ना 80 मसल्स है, and इसकी composition जो है n into n minus 1 divided by 2 अगर करो तो huge number of compositions are possible. Today, computers are capable of interpreting almost all such combinations. And you can understand somebody's attitude very easily. For example, by having a face on the top, you see one-sided movement in the face is actually not happiness, it's sarcasm. People are sarcastic. माइक्रो एक्सप्रेशन हम कहते हैं इसको. तो फेस tells your attitude. That you are anxious, by this face we can understand it. Not only that, paralinguistic behavior, that is, what you say is not important to me, how you say is very important to me. So the how factor, that is your pitch, your timbre, loudness, everything matters. Suppose you are facing your boss and you have done something very wrong, you will not be able to talk confidently. And confidence is reflected in your vocalizations, not in verbalizations. Vocalization means how you speak. Verbalization means what you speak. So your level of silence, how much silence you are maintaining, what are the kind of speech disturbances you have while you speak, also talks about your attitude. Your behavior, gesture, also tells about your attitude. The person is doing something which is called self-intimacy behavior. You have asked someone a question and he has started touching his neck. Not that there is a mosquito bite in the neck. He's touching his neck just to have a little more time. We call it self-intimacy behavior, auto contact. And that tells that he is hesitant to tell something to you. Or even you can guess somebody's attitude through their eyes. I'll give you more examples. Now, eyes, as I said, when you talk to each other, the way you are maintaining eye contact tells about your attitude. We measure the degree between the two eye contacts. If the eye contact is down, it means no, I don't like you, or I am having a negative attitude. If I have a positive attitude, I'll maintain the eye contact. So today we have got peopleometer. Today you have got eye tracking instruments. These instruments can easily measure whether you are your attitude towards certain thing is good or bad. As I said, touch and tactile behavior. Look, this man is talking to you, and this man, this is suppose you, and this is another man. Who is having what kind of attitude depends on their hand movement. Somebody who is confident, whose hand movement are different. Somebody who is less confident, his eyes are collapsed. This is called oculomics. This one is called oculomics. If you are telling lies, if you have got negative attitude, then it is reflected in your pupil. You see the two eyes. The difference between two eyes is the pupillary size. Not that in one person you have got two different eye movement. Two different people of the two different eyes of the same person with a bad attitude and a wrong attitude, a good attitude. If you are telling lies, the pupillary size becomes bigger. The pupillary size becomes bigger. If you are telling the truth, the pupillary size does not need to be bigger, because by pupillary size, we absorb a lot of energy, lot of input from outside. If you are telling truth, or if you have got a positive attitude, you do not have to scan the environment. But if you are telling the lies, or if you have got negative attitude, you'll have to scan that who is looking at you. So your pupillary size is big. Like proximal behavior is another, the attitude. When you meet a person, a man and a woman, how closely you are meeting to each other. There could be an intimate space, there could be a personal space, there could be a social space, there could be a public space. So your attitude is reflected how you are sitting. Suppose if your attitude is bad, moving leg syndrome, for example, पैर हिलाते रहते हैं, या आप distance maintain करते हो physically, that's a reflection of your negative attitude. So interview में ये सब count की जाती है और देखा जाता है कि what kind of behavior you are making. Now I'll give you some short clips quickly so that you understand how attitude we understand. अगर किसी के कॉन्फिडेंस पुअर है, बैड पॉस्चर है, तो इस तरह से दिखेगा. अगर कोई स्ट्रेस में है तो ear grab, self stroke, auto contact, these kind of behaviors are possible. अगर अपने को दबाना चाह रहा है, कुछ बोलना चाह रहा है, गुस्सा बहुत है मगर बोलना नहीं चाह रहा है, रेस्ट्रेन करना चाह रहा है, तो वो लिप बाइट करता है. अगर कोई एग्रेसिव है, हम कहते हैं इसे पैसिव एग्रेशन. तो इजेक्टर सीट पोजीशन, माने जैसे ही बातचीत खत्म होएगा मैं निकल जाऊंगा, मैंने आई डोंट लाइक यू, इसे कहते हैं पैसिव एग्रेशन. हैंड्स टू चिक, अगर आप बोर्ड हो, you don't like me or like my discussion, you will have hands to cheek. It's an expression of your boredom. Blank face, that you are not listening to me. Eye contact, dekho, you are not listening to me. You are thinking something else. Your mind is clouded. It's something else. I am discussing something with you, but you are looking somewhere else. If you have got furrowed forehead, it means you have got concern, you have got negative views about it. You are worried about something. If you have got interlaced fingers, it means, well, I'm frustrated, I've got negative thoughts. I mean, I can't do anything, but I don't accept you as well. Now, the point is that there are hundreds of such behavior slices. We call it thin slices of behavior. Now, these thin slices of behavior, today, everything is captured through high-speed cameras or even ordinary CCTV cameras, and they can be analyzed. Like I am talking to you, each expression of mine can be captured, and then you can analyze that what is the kind of involvement I'm trying to have for you to talk about how attitude is measured. So it is possible that we can have thin slices of behavior, which is called behaviometry. So psychometry is not the only answer. Scaling technique is not the only answer. There could be situation judgment test. There could be biological test. There could be behaviometric test. Biological test, as I said, I'm not including here, but more often, biological measures like polygraph is utilized, like functional magnetic resonance imaging are utilized, which are objective indicators of somebody's attitude. You do not have to base on somebody's subjective responses to it. So it is possible today that you can measure attitude through a variety of methods. Micro expressions, that is, we capture these micro expressions in a high-speed camera, and the camera can capture these photographs less than 100 milliseconds, because anything that is expressed in less than 100 milliseconds, our eyes cannot capture it. But you can later analyze it, because these expressions, which are your real feeling, stay only for less than 100 milliseconds. And then you try to camouflage it. And then you have a different display rule, which is socially acceptable. So when you do a time series analysis of those micro expressions, you understand the attitude of a person. Because these micro expressions tell a lot about your attitude. You may later on start smiling, but actually you had a negative view about it. So it's a behavioral leakage. They are involuntary. These expressions are involuntary, last for less than 500 milliseconds. So if you can analyze those expressions, you can see here the micro expressions, how they are moving. There is an onset, and there is an apex, and there is an offset of an expressions. So if you do a time series analysis over a period of time, maybe 2 seconds, you will find at least 50 such expressions, and you can analyze whether a person's attitude was poor at a certain point of time or not, at a particular level of discussions or not. Today, we try to understand somebody's attitude through different other methods. I don't even do this camera capturing. By the color of your face also tells me your attitude. The color of your face can be captured through thermal imaging. If you are really happy, then there would be blood supply more in these areas. And thermal camera can easily capture it if there is a higher vascular movement in this area. But here, we do not have it. It means he is laughing, but there is no vascular movement, no blood supply in that. So it's a fake. So we understand whether it's a fake emotion or a real emotion. Not only about the encoder, the person who is expressing their attitude, the person who is seeing it through tracking cameras, we can also understand that which area of the face you are actually looking at. So images can be captured through your eye tracking devices, that whether you are interested in a particular face or not. So as I said, there are many more ways we have started understanding human behavior and the attitude of the people. And these attitudes not only restrict ourselves only to understand at a subjective level, it can also be done at an objective level too. So I'm done. If there is anything, I can explain it to you.
Sir, I have a query.
Yes, Bolo.
Sir, does the behavioral analysis depend upon the surroundings we live in?
Surroundings you can always manipulate, but it can be surrounding invariant, it can be surrounding dependent. Both possibilities are there. You can create the surrounding in order to experimentally test whether the surrounding is more responsible or it is his attitude which is more responsible.
Basically, this is hypothetical.
Not hypothetical. Why hypothetical? Because the person's attitude is not just good or bad, or just poor or excellent. It varies from the two polarities. It is possible that in certain contexts, my attitudes remain good. In certain contexts, my attitudes do not remain good. So I can test attitude based on a certain context. When I go to my office, my attitude becomes bad. When I remain in my family, my attitude remains good. So context can depend. Or it's also possible that my attitude is bad in both family as well as in the office. So it can be context dependent, or it can be context invariant.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yes, Bolo.
Sir, it's only that, like, if I went to an office in a good mood, but like something mishappened and mood became bad, so what would we call that? Like, context?
Well, the mood is a separate construct. It's not attitude. Attitude is relatively, if it is transient, it is not attitude. It is just a mood. Mood is transient, short-lived. I can have happy mood, sad mood, happy, sad, fear, anger, surprise, disgust. Hundreds of moods can be possible, but they are all transient, short-lived.
Sir, but sir, my mood can affect my attitude also, no?
Yeah, mood can influence your attitude. Suppose you have got a good attitude, any happy incident, suppose आप ऑफिस जा रहे हो, आपने देखा somebody is helping a beggar, and आपको देख के बहुत अच्छा लगा, and your since you have a good attitude, your mood is uplifted. It's possible आपको अच्छा लगा ना ऑफिस में जाकर आप कहीं किसी से भी मिलें, so you are saying hello to each one of them. You are smiling more often. It's quite possible. Mood can influence your attitude, but mood and attitude are two different constructs.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So if there is no other question, then I can leave.
Shalini?
Yes. Appealing points made out by Sir that getting a job need an aptitude, but succeeding in a job need an aptitude. Sir here explains very nicely how attitude can affect a person's life and how our attitude is based on our past experience or some or our prejudice or defense mechanism and how we can like how one can show like how one can like measure an attitude of a person. I would like to express our deep thanks on the behalf of Birla Institute of Technology of Lalpur campus to our guest, Mr. Manas Kumar Mandal, for such an amazing and informative presentation and giving us an insight on this relative topic. I also extend my gratitude to Dr. Vandana Bhattacharya, ma'am, director of our center, for providing us such a platform. My sincere thanks to director to Dr. Syed Chaube sir and Dr. Syed and his header sir who took efforts to organize this event. Special acknowledgement to all my faculty members for joining this session and making this a great success. I I also like to thank the committee member who contributed in this event. I would also like to express my gratefulness to all the attendees for taking out our time and supporting us in our endeavors. We look forward to conduct more such events hereafter and hope Manas sir will join us in future. And thank you very much, sir. It was a very informative session
Thank you.
and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
sir. Thank you, sir. This is Satyajit Chaudhary from BIT.
Great.
Sir, I will use this concept in my research, further research for this Khadi and village industries. My area is in Khadi and village industries, and obviously, I will use this scale
Mhm.
to understand the behavior of the Khadi weavers and the village artisans.
Okay.
So,
Great.
thanks, many thanks to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Samri.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, madam. This is Satyajit.
On behalf of BIT Mestra Fraternity, I would like to extend a warm and hearty welcome to our workshop on short-term training program on research methodology basics organized by Birla Institute of Technology off campus, Lalpur, Ranchi. It is a great pleasure to have amidst us our special guest, Dr. Swati Dher ma'am. Ma'am will be talking on the topic questionnaire design, measurement of construct and design survey instrument. A special welcome to our director, Dr. Vandana Bhattacharjee ma'am, who has been kind enough to support our endeavor. A very warm welcome to our esteemed faculty members, other guests, and attendees present here. Our guest speaker, Dr. Swati Dher ma'am, is specialized in organizational behavior and human resources. Ma'am is designated as an associate professor at International Management Institute, New Delhi. Ma'am, your presence with us is a refulgence and a source of inspiration for the students present here. Now I request ma'am to take forward the session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm privileged to be here. And thanks for making me part of this particular FDP. So can you see my screen? Is it the screen is shared?
Yes, madam. It's visible.
Yeah. So basically, I wanted to clarify before I start that we will be covering. So basically, we have two sessions. One session is scheduled tomorrow. So one session is scheduled tomorrow. Today's session, I'll try to take you all. I suppose some of you are doing PhD. If I'm not wrong, you are doing your research.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Maybe some of the faculty colleagues. So a warm welcome to the session. We'll be starting with how these scales are developed, because measurement is a very, very important part in the methodology. And most of the times we are not aware that how should we measure our abstract construct, right? How these scales emerge, isn't it? And what are the process to develop, or what is the methodology to develop a scale itself, right? Most of the time we use existing scales. So I just wanted to, on the basis of the discussion with Satyajit, I could, plan my session in such a way that I would take you through the journey of developing a scale, right? The reliability and the validity part, and then moving ahead with the designing the survey, which is again a very small part, in the sense that how should you create the link, how should you develop the form, how can you make a shortened form in a way that which is not exhaustive for the respondents, and you can actually plan it in such a way that it looks very small, right? So I mean, that is a part which we'll be doing hands-on, because we don't have much time. Otherwise I could have give you the hands-on in the SPSS, but I would be sharing the SPSS window maybe in tomorrow's session, so that you will get to know how do we develop a scale, right? Am I clear with the expectations? Any other expectations, so that I can actually plan it accordingly in my session? Anything else? Yeah. Please make it interactive. Had it been an offline session, I had, I usually make sure that everyone speaks up. Yes, Arunima.
You can go with your own pace, madam. Everything is okay. I know that you can handle it.
No, that's not a problem. But I should also know what are they expecting, because otherwise it would be a monologue. So I would request everyone to keep the session more interactive, so that I will get to know whether it is making sense or not, so that I can customize it if there is a need to. Let me know if there are any other expectations other than what I had explained, right? So if you have anything to share, write it in the chat box. Even if I am actually covering or discussing it, I'll try to address your concerns. Okay. So moving ahead, as I said, I had planned something, but I'm not sure how much I would be able to cover. So let's start. So basically, methodology, that's a most important and most critical part of a paper, because at times, if your methodology is not strong enough, your papers get rejected. Right? At the end of the day, if you are writing a research paper or if you're writing your thesis, you have to make sure, you need to ensure that your methodology is very, very strong, right? Now, most of the time, people have started to use mixed methodology, in starting from the grounded theory approach, following or taking some of the qualitative techniques, then getting some of the themes emerging from those qualitative methods and moving to the quantitative methods, collecting data through survey method, running or analyzing that data and coming to the conclusion. I mean, that's an ideal way of conducting a research. So your research methodology, now each, there are qualitative methods, there are quantitative methods. When you start your research agenda or research problem or your thesis proposal, when you start working on that, with my limited experience in academics, I can tell you the possible way, do a thorough literature review. Because, your research gap should be very strong. It should come from the synthesis of the literature. And in the era of digitization, everything is available on a click of a mouse, right? So I think you should do a thorough literature review, because if your research gaps are identified in a nice way, in a structured manner, then only you will be able to identify the right and the appropriate methodology. Now, don't go with the this, what should I say, with the fad of this methodology or SEM and all possible fancy techniques. Go with the technique which is the most appropriate technique for your research question. It might be only qualitative, it might be only quantitative, it might be mixed. So please identify. That would be my humble submission to all of you. Don't follow any of the fancy technique just because your guide is obsessed with that. Sorry for that word, but if you think your friends are obsessed with that, this is the only technique which is really very fancy, gives very nice figures and pictures. No, go by the method which is most appropriate for your research, right? Having said that, I would like to cover in this session the methodology part, a very specific and a unique part, because most of the time we are not aware as a student that what is a scale, right? When you say item, what is an item in a scale? Whether it's an existing scale or it is a new scale, right? So moving ahead, this is what I had planned. Let's see whether it really makes sense to you all or not. So I hope this is what the expectations would be. So I just wanted to know your expectations. Is there anything else which you would like me to cover in 3 hours? Because today have 1.5 and tomorrow 1.5 hour. Anything else, class?
As of now, it is good, ma'am. If in case there is something which is left out, I will let you know.
Okay. Thank you. So great. So moving ahead with the sessions, right? With the slides. So basically, the problem or the objective of any research methodology is you identify the constructs, and the construct is coming from maybe sometimes your literature review, or sometimes your construct is not well defined in the literature, or it's a new construct, right? So if it is a new construct, and when I say construct means it's a hypothetical variable composed of different elements that are thought to be related. It's an abstract idea. In a general language, it's an abstract idea which I want to measure. In social sciences, we all are aware that at times the construct is very unobservable. It's a latent variable, right? When I say latent variable, it is not observed or can be measured directly, right? So what should I do? I should try to measure it through manifest variables. Okay, what is manifest variable? As the word suggests, it is something which is observable, measurable. For example, in social sciences, we measure, or in management and OB research especially, we measure job satisfaction, right? How do we measure it? There is no sacrosanct number, right? So we try to ask certain set of questions to the respondents, and we try to understand, okay, if a person has rated towards 4 and 5, a person is pretty much satisfied. If a person is rated towards 1 and 2, that means a person is not satisfied. So you actually, in a research problem, you try to, for example, you are trying to understand the factors which are leading to job satisfaction. So you have identified certain factors, for example, supervisor support, organization culture, leadership, right? So these are the factors which will lead to job satisfaction. So you had tried to measure all those constructs, and you are trying to run the analysis, right? Do the data analysis. But for example, if I say I want to measure a new construct, for example, which is like gossip, right? It's not a well-defined construct. We don't have a lot of measures on gossip because it's difficult to define it. Number one, if you define it, there are not many existing scales on gossip, right? Because gossip itself is little complex, right? If a person is conversing or socializing, is it gossip, right? No. If a person is trying to backbite or for someone, or doing, is not talking nice about someone, is it gossip? Or is it a person trying to create rumors? Is that gossip? So what I'm trying to tell you, that construct is a variable, is an abstract idea which a researcher tries to explain. Now, how do I explain gossip is the most important part to start with, because the way I will define gossip, my entire scale development exercise is dependent on that, right? So figuring out whether my construct is based on theory or is it a new construct. Is it clear? Is the pace fine with the class?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Yeah. So then we try to move ahead understanding, okay, how would I measure gossip? Should we try to see whether the person how many times a person actually leaves his or her office, right? The number of hours a person is sitting in the office, or number of hours person is interacting with others. Okay, could this be a way to measure gossip? Yes or no? How to measure and what you want to measure. It's very, very important. Can I assume that if a person is not in office, he or she is involved in active gossiping? What would be the best way to measure gossip in the organizational context? Tell me, think about this.
I mean, if he's involving with the colleagues, not related with the official work, he's talking to them, and so it can be, said that he might be involved in gossiping.
Okay, great. So if he or she is not in the office, or he is actually not sitting, for example, if it is a regular job, sitting in computer, or sitting is required in office, and the person is not in his or her chair, right? It's not necessary that the person is doing gossip. So it's not a right measure, isn't it? Person might be away for certain meetings or certain field jobs, or maybe some relevant office related work, right?
So if he's not like, at his designated place, and he's in touch with one or two other colleagues, not officially. So typically there are like office in a corporate setting, there are meeting rooms and board rooms. Yeah. So if he's not there and he's simply standing or sitting in some idle places, so it can be assumed that
it can be a measure of gossip, right? Very true, very true. So really, thank you. So basically, you can measure gossip by understanding how many hours a person was away from his or her designated place and was not involved in the official work, right? Or was not involved in the official conversation. How difficult is it to measure? How would you measure that? Tell me, if you have to do a research on that. if you have to score people, employees in your organization on the construct called gossip, and you are trying to understand how should I do that, is it not difficult to measure, because you cannot go and track the conversation whether it's official or not. It's again very difficult to actually ensure that when the people are sitting together, they are only talking about the official conversations, right? It's pretty much easy in the online setup because everything might be recorded, but in an offline setup, it's really difficult, right? Now, probably you can measure it. This could be one way. I'm not saying it's impossible. This could also be one way to measure, the number of hours a person was away from the designated place and was involved in some unofficial practices. Other way could be I can actually develop a scale for measuring gossips, right? Maybe I can ask certain questions to the person, and then I can actually conclude that the person is high on gossip or the person is not on high or low on gossip, right? So probably we need to understand. So first thing, just the summary what we had discussed till now. Identify the right research gap, right? I could get to know that there's a construct where I want to study that gossip leads to job dissatisfaction, or gossip leads to low performance, right, or turnover intentions. So probably I had identified. Now I have to measure it, and now I'm trying to understand how should I measure it. There could be one or there could be multiple ways to measure it. Now I realize I did the literature review and I realize there are not many scales available for gossip, and I want to develop certain scale on my own. What should be the process to do that? I'm also trying to understand that I am trying to include a phenomena saying gossip on those aspects. So there could be a specific definition of the construct, right? Moving ahead, sometimes we actually say, no, I don't want to develop a scale. I want to use a existing scale. So for example, this is a scale of performance. Yingli, Wang and Nicole has given it in 2011. I want to measure performance of the employees, and there are 6 items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items, right? Have you ever wondered how these 6 items have suddenly emerged or have been evolved? Would you like to know the process? How have we concluded on those 6 items, which you may use in your research? How Yingli has actually developed it? Don't you get wondered by how these scales are immersed in social sciences? Actually, today I'm going to discuss how these 6 item scale has been developed for a construct called performance, right? This itself is a full thesis. So if you want to do a broader study or a detailed study of developing your own scale, defining your own constructs, so make sure you have sufficient bandwidth to do that, right? So it's a lengthy process, right? Now moving ahead, there are 8 steps. I tried to put it in a more stepwise approach so that you are not lost in the process of understanding the development process. So there are 8 steps which should be followed when you are developing a new scale. Remember, a new scale, right? If you don't want to do that, the other possibility is you should use the existing scales, right? Like I had showed you in the last slide, right? This, right? So you decide in your research, if you have classical existing scales, already existing scales, I don't want to invest my energy into a new scale development process because there are already, well accepted scales, fine. If you don't have a scale, then let's develop a scale for my own construct, which is not well defined or which is a very new construct, right? So determine clearly what it is you want to measure, which is the construct definition. Because since you are defining it's a new construct, be very careful that what is the scope of that construct, how are you defining it, because that will decide how do you measure it, right? Generate an item pool, because once you define the construct, you can actually come up with number of statements. Items are nothing but the statements which are trying to measure your construct, right? Now these items become your manifest variable. Your abstract idea or your construct, which is a newly defined construct, becomes your latent variable, right? Determine the format for measurement, right? How are you going to measure it? So I'm going to discuss all these, steps. Have initial item pools reviewed by the experts. Why do we do that, or what is the need of doing that? Because sometimes I get too attached with the items developed, right? And sometimes I'm not able to see it from a neutral point of view. Is it not a good idea to get some idea or some acceptance or some kind of review by the expert? So this is called content validity, right? Just remember the words. We will discuss that in detail. Now, the step 5 is consider the inclusion of validation items, right? Validation items are important and it's little tricky. How? If I want to say that gossip leads to turnover, right? Turnover means people have the tendency to leave the organization. So the people, those are involved, if there is too much gossip in the organization, that means people are not committed, they are not focusing on the right things, and they have the intentions to leave, right? What will I do when I'm developing the scale for gossip? I would include an existing scale of turnover intention and would love to see whether my developed scale is appropriately related with the turnover, because my theory says that your more gossip will lead to turnover, right? This is called a criterion validity. I have involved or I have taken a criteria for which my scale needs to have the appropriate relationship. Why are we doing it? Because we do understand the turnover intention is an existing scale. If my scale, because that is a valid scale that is already existing, that is already being tested for the reliability and validity. If my scale is also valid, it will have the right relationship with the criteria. I'll come to that. Most of the time when my students develop scales or in the psychometric testing course, I ask them to do a project to develop a scale. They actually forget to include the criterion variable, right? Then administer the items to a development sample. You need to test it as a pilot, whether this is really making sense or not. When they actually give you the rating on your developed items, you want to test it whether it is really making sense or not, because there might be some redundancy, there might be some overlap, so you try to get some data to test it, right? So then you evaluate the items and you optimize the scale length. Now I'll be going on one by one each step. Any confusion, any questions till now? Any questions?
Not question, ma'am, but just an observation.
Yeah.
Can't we use qualitative research in order to find out the items of the construct? Say, for example, we are discussing gossip here.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, we can go and ask the employees of certain organization.
Yeah.
How would you? What can be the? How can we measure gossip, or what you would define gossip as? So, can't it be done to what I can say, to develop a scale for the construct?
Yeah, so partially correct what you are suggesting. See, qualitative is not something going and asking people, number one, right? Once you decided that gossip is the construct which I want to study, you did some literature review and you defined gossip. Okay, after defining the gossip, now you want to measure it and you want to develop the items. Did you get my point? Now you cannot go and ask people what is gossip. You can go and get it reviewed by the people saying that these are the 10 items through which I'm trying to measure gossip. See, you have to freeze something to start with. You cannot go and ask people what is gossip. You need to define the construct, number one. Once you define the construct, then only you can go to the next step of developing items. You are going to get it reviewed by people, don't worry, but that's not qualitative approach, right? Qualitative approach is little different. So that is a different methodology altogether. You can involve experts at a certain stage, but to start with, you need to define the construct. That's a basic thing which should be done ideally by the literature. If there is not defined, it's a very new construct, and you are the person who has coined that term. Then you have to be clearly defined it. So it seems a little tricky, but believe me, everyone. For example, if you talk about employee engagement in 90s, In 1990, William Kahn has coined this term. That was the first time he defined what is employee engagement. Later on, people had multiple definitions of employee engagement. So you need to understand that you need to have a great background. You talk to people. I mean, you can talk to people to understand what is engagement. You can go and observe in the organization what is engagement. Other people have defined engagement in a different way. When softly says that when person is, has three components: vigor, dedication, and absorption together, then they are engaged. So your definition might be different than the other person's definition. But to start with, you need to have a right construct definition. And that's not the qualitative. That should not be done ideally by the qualitative process. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So moving ahead, purpose, as I said, it has to be very clear that to design a questionnaire that provides a quantitative measurement of an abstract theoretical variable, right? Always remember, not all surveys are scales. Decide whether it is really is a scale or not. Sometimes our students, float the survey, right? And they ask, or they are trying to understand. For example, usually if it is a marketing research survey, they are trying to understand the acceptance of a new product or a service. They are trying to understand the preferences of customers. So these are our typical surveys. Or sometimes, companies are trying to understand the customer satisfaction. You might have experienced in some of the malls or in the big stores, they ask you to touch a finger or touch Smiley's scale, right? Whether you were happy or not. Did you had the right, great shopping experience? So these are all typical surveys, but every survey might not be a scale, right? So always remember the purpose of your study and then move ahead whether you want to conduct a survey just to understand the patterns or you really want to measure a particular defined construct, right? Good scales possess both validity and reliability. These are the two psychometric characteristics which are very, very important for any scale to be appropriate scale to be used in the future research. There could be two methods of reasoning: deductive approach or inductive approach. What is deductive approach? It says that you have a theory, right? You develop a hypothesis, you collect some evidences in the form of observation, and then you confirm, right? For example, you say that all birds fly, right? Right? All birds fly. That is the theory. Theory says that all birds, any animal or any species which has wings can fly, which is called bird, right? A specific observation is the cardinal is a bird, right? So we had an observation and then we try to confirm or conclude that cardinal is a bird that flies, right? So that is a conclusion. That's a deductive approach. Mostly we follow this, mostly, right? 80%, I'll say. What is inductive approach? Inductive approach is something when you are starting from a new observation, which is really applicable in the scale development. You observe something, okay? What did you observe? You observed that cardinal is a bird that flies, okay? Then you observed, you collected more sample, you said, robin is also a bird that flies, okay? So you had similar observations. Right? So you said, I had observed there is a pattern emerging, right? Then you say, can I test this hypothesis? All birds fly. Okay. Yes. Then you are actually trying to emerge or you are trying to incept a new theory which says all birds fly. That is the way we are actually trying to develop a theory. Believe me, at certain point in time, the people or the classical authors or the scientists had followed this inductive approach. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, so what do? We try to actually move ahead with those theoretical assumptions and try to test it in our own context, right? With multiple set of hypotheses. It's a little philosophical, but it's really, really important to understand what is your approach in the research, whether you want to start with an inductive approach, you want to observe certain things. And this is mostly the inductive approach is followed in the qualitative methods, right? Because you are not very sure about the pattern or the themes or the construct. You are trying to observe things. You go and observe. You actually spending time on the field. You try to see the patterns, and then you try to actually form a hypothesis. And through a structured way or method, you try to come up with a conclusion which becomes your theory. Most of the time in quantitative methodology, we try to be more deductive, I'll say. You have a set of theory. You had developed an hypothesis that in this context, employee engagement leads to performance. I want to actually gather more data as an observation, and then I want to confirm, yes, highly engaged people are having high performance. Is that okay? Inductive approach and deductive approach? Is that okay? Yeah?
Yes, ma'am.
Should I move ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Give me some, quick responses. Is it going good or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All good? Because
yeah, it's going good, ma'am.
I can't see you people because
very good and quite interesting.
All good?
Okay. Yes, ma'am. All good.
Chalo. Right. Thanks. So basically, moving ahead to step number 2, we had defined the construct. We had also decided which methodology we are going to follow, which is deductive or inductive. Then we are moving ahead. Okay, we have defined a construct, for example, gossip. And now I need to write good items for a scale, which is definitely an art rather than a science. Have you ever realized that the existing scales, the kind of language or the statements they use, they are very neutral, right? So the wording of the statement, the readability of the statement, the structure of the statement is well defined so that when a person or a respondent is reading it, he or she is not confused, right? He or she is answering the question by understanding it. That's very, very important. If they don't understand it, what would be the problem with our construct measurement? There would be a lot of measurement error. And if there is an error, the conclusions of your research will not be generalizable. Okay, so think creatively about the construct you seek to measure. Make the question simple, specific, and straightforward. Avoid biased language, emotional words, emphasize text. It should be very simple. Even when you are writing your statements, make sure the superficial or the hygiene factor, for example, there should not be any italics, there should not be any bold. It should be simple statements which are easy to read and which are easy to comprehend. Right. Avoid double-barreled questions. What is a double-barreled question? I'm sure you people must have, covered it in some of the other courses. Do you think that the technical service department is prompt and helpful? How is it double-barreled? What is the double-barreled thing here? Can anyone tell me?
They are asking like 2 questions, so that they are prompt and helpful.
Helpful. Maybe technical service department is very prompt but not helpful, or maybe helpful but not prompt. Right? So we should try to avoid double-barreled questions. Good. Avoid non-monotonic questions. Now, what is non-monotonic thing? Is something which needs probing, further probing. For example, only people in military should be allowed to personally own assault rifles. Now, this question is little tricky. It's not very clear. Now, is the person asking that the people, those who are in service now, should be allowed to own an assault rifles, or the retired military people or the personnels are also allowed to own an assault rifle? Only people in military? So this question is not very clear and it needs further probing. So try to avoid those kind of questions, right? Or try to reframe those questions, right? Moving ahead, I assume that once you define the construct, you can come up with more number of items, right, than the desired final number of items. What should be the ratio? Usually, if you want to develop a scale for example, a unidimensional scale for measuring, for example, strategic thinking, right? I had a paper on that, so I'll share that after this class so that you can come prepared and read that paper, so that the discussion would be now, the next class would be, tomorrow's class would be actually, I will be showing you the real data which I had used to write that paper, and how had we come up with, how had we emerged with 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions of that construct, okay? So usually, basically, we start with 2:1 kind of a ratio. So we try to keep as many items as possible, right? Now, why do we do that? Because we are not sure that which items would be having or would have less loading, or will not be loaded, or will have multiple loading or cross loading, right? So because you start with a big list of items, because there is a possibility of some items would be screened out, right? Redundancy. We need to make a good balance between brevity and the overlap. Why we are doing that? Because if you have a lot of redundancy, you will have a very high reliability coefficient. Reliability is nothing but a function of number of items. Reliability is nothing but the consistency of your measurement, right? What is consistency of the measurement? That when you are measuring certain construct, right, every time your scores are pretty much consistent. For example, if you want to measure IQ of a person, do you think IQ of a person changes every day? It's a consistent pattern or a behavior or an inherent characteristic of a person. Unless there's a very big event in his or her life, the IQ score remains more or less same, right? So reliability is when, if you are measuring IQ multiple times of the same individual, if you are getting scores like 100, 50, 80, 70, that means the measurement of IQ is not correct, right? So make sure that your constructs are reliable. How would we do that? We will actually try to see how do we actually measure the reliability of our newly developed construct, right? You have to make a good balance between the number of items and the overlap of the items, right? It should not be too less, it should not be too many, right? If it is too many, it would be very difficult to collect data, and there will be a lot of repetition, which respondents may not like. So for example, what is redundancy? I will do almost anything to ensure my child's success, and similar, same thing in a different frame of statement. No sacrifice is too great if it helps my child achieve success, right? Probably if I am in the case of developing the items, I would prefer to keep the first statement because it is more simpler, right? And it's actually the same thing we are intending to ask, right? Avoid exceptionally lengthy items, reading difficulty level, right? So make sure when you are developing the new items, your items are not too long, and the reading difficulty, the readability is pretty low, right? Readability is pretty high. Use reverse coding for the number of items. Why do we do that reverse coding, right? Just to break the monotony, right? Does it really help on a practical purpose? No. To be honest, with my experience, I had written 3-4 papers on scale development. I had developed few scales. When you actually include reverse coded items, somehow it is not loaded. Most of the time, it gets removed from the final list. Reason, I mean, when I try to explore or try to introspect, and when I saw the data for those number of items, though we ensure, theory says that you should try to include some reverse coded items to break the monotony and see whether the respondent is really serious or not. Because if a respondent is not serious, if your response is not of good quality, a person might not even bother to read the items and can actually give you 5, 5, 5 throughout the questionnaire. If it is a reverse coded item, you should try to make it a regular coded item. How do we do that? If it is a reverse coded item, and if it is a scale of 5, right? So the 5 is the highest value plus 1, which is the lowest value, minus the selected response, right? If in a reverse coded item, if you are getting a response of 4, That means you need to regular code it and you need to convert that 4 into, what would be the regular code for a 4 reverse coded item? 5 plus 1, which is 6 minus 4, which would be 6 minus 4 would be is there anyone who is listening, or is just...
Ma'am, can you please give an example for reverse coding a question? Maybe, I mean,
yeah.
How do you...
Okay, so reverse coding is an item. Let me just go to a reverse coded item which I have kept. Yeah. For example, if it is a scale which is measuring materialism, right? Read these questions. I admire people who own expensive homes. So materialism is something about the materialistic items or the things, right? I admire people who own expensive homes, cars, and clothes. Some of the most important achievements in my life includes acquiring material possessions, right? Now read the third item. I don't place much emphasis on the amount of material objects people own as a sign of success, right? So this third question or the item is a reverse coded item. Similarly, fourth question, the things I own say a lot about how well I am doing in my life. So people, the main objective is that if I own many things as an objects, that is what the materialism is. I don't pay much attention to the material objects other people own. Now these two asterisk, item number 3 and item number 5, are reverse coded items. Is it clear now?
Does that mean that the reverse coded questions would always have a negative connotation?
Yes, it will.
And I mean, don't you think it is a bit complicated for the
respondent?
Yeah, to comprehend the question itself. I mean, even I am finding, as compared to the first two questions, I have to answer the third question. I would have to read it and maybe twice or thrice to understand.
Yes, actually, you are answering the question why reverse coded items don't get loaded. You get my point?
Right.
This is the reason, because half of the people as respondents, I was coming to that only.
So I mean, respondents actually increase my load of work. First of all, my respondent would be heavy reading the question. Second, I have to, convert the reverse code into the regular code. So I mean, it is doing the same. Instead of asking a regular code question, if I'm asking a reverse code question, it is like doing a simple thing in a complicated way, even for the respondent as well as for me.
No, is it? No. Why it is desirable then? Why theory says that? Why all the good researchers says we should? I do that. I personally do. I do include reverse coded items in my research. Okay. How do I make sure Dipakshi reads all questions?
Okay, so maybe just to test the seriousness of the response.
Exactly the same point. So the quality of your response also needs to test it. Because sometimes people just fill 5 across the survey, and since you, for example, I'm an instructor. if I'm doing a survey and I want my students' responses, since I'm an instructor, I'm teaching something, they do understand that the marks are dependent on ma'am's, survey response. So they will fill it out, but they may not read it seriously.
But in case I have a very serious set of respondents, then also would you recommend the reverse coding?
Yeah. See, that's not possible. That's not something which you can guarantee, number one. Right. Number two, if at all the respondent is serious, they will read it and they will respond accordingly. For you, it is a regular coded or a reverse coded. A person, if he or she reads it, it might take a little more seconds to comprehend. What is that exactly? But a person will answer it on 2, right? In a scale of 5.
Right. I get it, ma'am. I got it.
So if you are serious respondent, you will respond it accordingly. So instead of saying that maybe I am a person who loves materialism, right? So on all those items I have given, I admire people, who own expensive things on 5. Okay, I really love materialism. I am a person who likes materialism. And I would rate second question also 5. But the moment I read third question, I don't place much emphasis. I don't think so. So I say I disagree with that. So what I'll say, I'll rate it 2. Okay. So if I rate it 2, as a researcher, how would you convert that response that I was telling you?
Yes,
so got it, 5 plus 1, which is lowest and highest, minus this 2. Now it would be converted into 4. That means as materialism,
I am now 4, and now in the reverse coding, it's 2. I got that.
Got it. Right. So this is what, okay, it's very, very interesting. We do, include these items because that helps us to understand whether we are actually the person serious or not. It's not possible, Dipakshi, to get always serious respondents. You will always have some noise in the data. And to avoid those avoid those measurement errors, we try to include that. Having said that, what happens, I tell you, Just let me open my screen here. What exactly in the real life happens? Some people read it in a sensible way, seriously, give the right coding. But some people, as you said, it's difficult for them to comprehend. Sometimes they give a rating which is consistent with their other rating. So what happens? What machine does? Machine is not God, right? Whatever you are feeding in the machine, you will get the similar output. Now, for example, on item number 3, if I get a response, some response is 2, some response is 4. What would be the overall understanding of the machine? For example, factor analysis, if I'm doing. Machine is confused, no?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, the extreme is quite varied, but that could happen even in, a simple coded question also.
Yes.
It's on the personal bias, so maybe personal whims and fancies that I'm responding. Maybe 2 responses may not be coherent to what the result I am looking for.
Yes. So yes, just to answer your question, it is possible in a regular code item also. I may not love materialism, so I might actually give all the ratings low. But that is the kind of sample I'm choosing. So my sample is very diverse. So in that way, I have got responses which are normally distributed. Did you get my point? Some people high on 5, 2, 3, 4. I have a very nice, diverse, normally distributed answers. Right?
So in this, should we be going in for having diverse views, or should we be going into having a group which is coherent to the result we are looking for?
No, you should go for a diverse group. Now that all depends on your research objective. Do you want to do a study for a specific sector, a specific group of people? For example, if I want to do a study for MBA students and I'm targeting I want to measure values of the students before they come to the institution and by the time they pass out from the institution. Right. I am talking about a very specific group of people, MBA students, and I'm also very specific about the type of colleges they are actually entering. Right. So I'm not talking about tier 1 or tier 3. I'm talking about tier 2 colleges. Right. So then my sample is very specific. Yeah. But if I want to do a generic study about the students' perception about the college education, then I want to have a diverse group of people from university, from college, from deemed university, from anywhere. Right? So that also depends on what kind of research gaps you have identified and what do you want to achieve from your research. So your research, that's why I said your literature review, your research gap identification is very important, that how are you actually proceeding?
Right.
Okay. If you want to just get similar kind of responses, believe me, that will not help in your research. There should be diversity in your sample so that your sample is sufficiently representing your population.
Right.
Okay. Great. Should I move ahead? Nice. You keep on asking questions so that I'm also feeling a little more motivated. Okay. So moving ahead. Great. Thank you, Dipakshi.
Just a small question, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Regarding cross-loading questions, so ma'am, so if, for example, we are having like 5 constructs and we are measuring it using like 5 items. So does it necessary to have a cross-loading question in each construct or 1 or 2 constructs in lot?
I answer your question exactly. I discussed that in tomorrow's session. So can you please hold on with your question?
Sure, ma'am.
Okay.
Sure.
Remind me. I will discuss the cross-loading part. I will show you how rotated component matrix of factor analysis in the SPSS look like. What would be the possibility of a reverse coded item? I won't be able to give you time to do that in your machine, but I give you sufficient demonstration so that you are able to do it. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So moving ahead, common structure, self-contained and no dependency between items. Now it should not happen that your second question is dependent on your first question. So try to avoid that part, because then it also creates confusion and it also gives you sometimes errors when you are measuring those things, right? So it should be self-contained and the common structure. Moving ahead, for example, when you want to measure something, right? How many of you belong to OBHR area? If I may ask this question. Give me some number, because any idea?
I'm from HR, Pakistan.
Great. Who else is from OBHR? How many people are there from OBHR? Okay, moving ahead, my only concern here is if you have to define attitude, how would you do that? Attitude is something, if you have read it, it's a construct which is an intent to behave or my dispositional behavior, right? Which is made up of 3 things. What is that? A, B, C of attitude, which is affection, cognition, and behavior. When I say behavior, is not the exact behavior, it's my intention to behave, right? Correct? So what I'm trying to explain, most of the time when you're defining a construct, right, it has to have 3 components, which is cognitive component, affective component, and behavior component, right? Cognitive, how a person thinks. Affective, how a person feels. And behavior is something, what is a predisposition. For example, you are raising turnover intention and you say, I'm thinking to leave this, I'm thinking to apply for new positions. Right? That's a cognitive component. I don't feel like to work in this organization. That's an affective component. I'm looking for a new opportunity. Right? I might leave the organization in coming year. That is my predisposition to the behavior, is a turnover intention. Right? So if I'm raising turnover intention as a construct, ideally it should have all three components, right, of measurement, right, of a construct, right. For example, if I want to measure the attitude of voters, right, towards two representatives of different political parties, right, can anyone quickly tell me? I believe both candidates bring strength to the table. Which component is cognitive, affective, or behavior? I believe it's something cognitive, right. I feel a strong connection with Namu. It's I feel. Is it affection? Affection, very good. I think Namu plan for healthcare reform is a good one, which is cognitive. I think Raga has a good grasp, which is again cognitive. Planning on voting for Raga is an affective, cognitive, or behavior? Behavior, right? So remember this, because this is an example which you can recall early. So remember, this is an attitude. Any construct is, most of the time, the things or the abstract construct which we are trying to measure is a work-related attitude, and you need to ensure that your attitude or your construct involves all three components when you are designing the new set of questions for a given construct, right? Measurement. Moving to the step 3, the measurement, the term questionnaire item is used to denote a single question on a survey corresponding to a single column in a data set. Is this statement clear to all of you? The term questionnaire item is used to denote a single question on a survey corresponding to a single column in a data set. For example, can you see if I'm writing something on my screen? Is it visible?
Yes.
Yeah. So for example, if this is your Excel file, right, and these are your columns, right? Now there are respondents, right? Maybe Dipakshi, Sahil, Priya, right, and Devansh. So these are the number of respondents in row, right? I'm trying to measure gossip, for example, and I have 4 items. I have named my items as G1, G2, G3, and G4. When I say an item, what I'm referring to? I'm referring G1 as an item. Item means G1 is nothing but a statement. Okay. And when I say item is corresponding to a single column in a data set. G1 means A has responded 5, B has responded 4, C has responded 3. So I'm referring a particular column. This is G1. G1 is a column which is representing one of the item. Is it clear, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Scales typically denotes. Yeah. Any questions? Right. Scales. Okay. Thank you. Scales typically denotes sets of questions which become mathematical combination of survey items. Right. Usually, a scale includes multiple items together. Right. I'll come down to the first order and the second order constructs a little late. Let me just finish this steps part. Moving ahead, I'm sure you must have heard about the measurement scales. Nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Are you clear on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So assignment is something where you can assign objects to categories, which is a nominal scale. Example, gender. Let me quickly just point it up, a quick recap. Gender, when you assign gender, male 1, female 2, yeah, male 0, female 1, it's all about categorizing it. When I'm assigning number 1 or 2, it has nothing to do with the magnitude of that number. Is that okay? Right? For example, if I have to categorize management functions, finance, strategy, economics, marketing, VHR, again, there is no, there is no ranking of the course functions. I'm just trying to give them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because my machine does not understand finance or VHR. My machine understands numbers. Okay. Order. Ordinal scale is magnitude. For example, if I want to hello, Pushpa, मैं class में पूछता हूँ, मैं phone करती हूँ. So basically, order is something you can order it. For example, if you want to order people of your class in terms of heights, so you are trying to rank people, right? You're trying to rank people in an order. What is the difference between ordinal scale and interval scale? Can anyone tell me quickly? Ordinal scale and interval scale. I mean, that's a very basic question. You must know that.
Ordinal are basically rankings. I mean, placing one above the other. Interval is between the two limits, maybe the lower limit and the upper limit.
Anyone else? So Likert scale is an ordinal or is an interval scale?
Ma'am, ordinal.
Likert scale is ordinal, but it is actually considered in social sciences as interval scale. The reason being, see, when I say ordinal, there is an order, right? For example, if I say education, right? I have 10th, 12th, then bachelor's, right? And then master's and PhD. Is it ordinal or is it interval? I rated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's visible, right? What I'm writing? Yeah. Is it ordinal or is it interval? There's an order, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But do you think there's an equal space between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5?
No, ma'am.
Right? It's an ordinal scale, but it's not an interval scale. There is an order. 10 to 12, you take 2 years. 12 to bachelor, you take 3 years, then 2 years, and then maybe 5 years. Right? So there is an order, but there is the interval between 2 points is not same. And that is why when you say Likert scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The distance between 1 to 2 remains same as 2 to 3 and 3 to 4, similarly 4 to 5. That is why in interval scale, the distance between 2 points is identical, and that is why Likert scale is considered as interval scale. So these two are called continuous scale, and these two are called categorical measures, categorical scale, right? Because I'm sure you must have done the research statistics, business statistics. These two categorization is very, very important, right? Ratio scale. Ratio is nothing but a scale which considers 0 as an absolute value, which has magnitude as well as direction, right? For example, age of an employee. It's a continuous scale. 0 years. Does it make sense? Where 0 has an absolute value, or 0 meters. It has absolute value. 0 years are possible. If a kid is, if an infant is just born, or if 3 months old, 4 months old, and if you have to measure the age in years, which is 0 years. So 0 has a meaning, right? 0 distance, 0 meter is a meaning, right? So this is actually your continuous scale and is an absolute measure in mathematics, right? Mostly in social sciences, we use these 3 kind of scales. For age, of course, we can use ratio scales. So be very clear that how do you want to measure your construct, right? A single item, some students in my class ask, ma'am, what is the need of making it so complex for a single construct? You are asking me to develop 20 items. Why can't we ask single question whether you are satisfied with your job or not? Tell me, what is the problem with a single item? If I just ask whether you are happy in your job or not, whether you are engaged in your job or not, will people give you the right answers?
Ma'am, when we do a cross-sectional study, then we collect the responses from a person in a single point of time. So that's why we need to ask them in multiple ways, because we are not getting back to him for another.
True, right? And we are not getting back to them. And also, it's, for example, start imagining that if you're in your exams, I'm trying to assess your competence or your learnability through one question, right? It's not possible to assess the entire evaluation based on one question. Imagine CAT score. CAT exam had only 4 questions. One is maths, English, reading, and general awareness. It's not giving you the entire spectrum of assessing a person in an overall capacity, right? That is why when you are trying to develop a construct measurement, you need to develop multiple items so that each and every component, affective, cognitive, behavioral component is covered and the construct is measured in a holistic way, right? Moving ahead, composite or the multiple item scales. Okay, so we do want to measure whether we want to give a composite scale or we want to measure it in a multiple item scale. Sometimes I have seen students, what they do, they are measuring job satisfaction through 5 items. But when they run regression, what do? They average it out. And what do? They actually put, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, JS1, JS2 as 5 columns. And then the 6th column, they put an average and they use it as an X1 value for the regression, right? What is the problem with that composite score? Not using the multiple item scale. So it becomes a composite score of average of your 5 items. Does it really help? Or a composite score of one single item? It does not help you. Number one, the reasons could vary. Basically, you are trying to give an overall, trying to understand the variation, the co-variation among the items. You are trying to capture it, all aspects of a given construct, as well as it also gives you better accuracy and consistency, right? It's the moment you actually average it out, the 5 items are averaged out, use a composite score, you had actually reduced or removed the variation among the items. So you are actually not helping the data to evolve or emerge the patterns which are actually hidden in the data. You're not allowing the data analysis to do that. So always remember, don't try to average it out. Try to understand the items variation through different methods. There are methods possible. In regression, you can't do that. That's why we are coming up with new techniques, SEM, and other methods which are actually trying to give you the analysis on each and every aspect of data. If you had to make a composite score, there's no need of asking multiple questions. Ask only one question. Okay. Accuracy and consistency, I'll come to it later. All relate to the larger issue of measurement error. If you're asking multiple questions, there's a high probability you are able to capture the different nuances of a given construct. Right? As I said, there are two kinds of variables, formative and reflective. Formative is something, I'll give you an example. Formative variables where you try to form it through different components. Right? See the first example. I'm trying to make a picture of a doll. So I'm trying to put his feet, his body, head together, and it becomes the overall measurement. Right? Reflective is something, each and every item is trying to measure the latent construct. Right? So this is my latent construct. How I am measuring it? By questions asking 1, 2, 3, right, 4 and 5, which are similar to this. So if I'm able to measure it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it will actually lead to measurement of my latent variable. Right? This is called reflective. Each and every item is the reflective of our overall construct. Formative is something, each and every part is not reflective of each other. We cannot put double arrows here. Yeah, we can put double arrows here. We cannot put double arrows here because when we club it, so it is actually the plus phenomenon. Example, employee engagement, you want to measure it through Softly's scale, which has 3 dimensions: vigor, dedication, and absorption. If I say I want to, this is an employee engagement. Imagine this particular figure is employee engagement. So now think about in the terms of, imagine yourself as a construct. This is my employee engagement, right? And I say this part is, when I say employee engagement happens when a person has vigor, enthusiasm, dedication, and absorption means availability in the given job. Employee engagement is not equal to only vigor. It is the sum of vigor, dedication, and absorption, right? So if I have to measure employee engagement, I have to measure all 3 components together, put it together, and then it will be the overall measurement of employee engagement. This is called second order construct. Employee engagement is remember this, note it down if you want to, it's a second order construct, while vigor is my first order construct, dedication is my first order construct, absorption is my first order construct. So when you have multi-dimensional constructs called second order construct, then you need to use formative variables, right? So don't get confused. If it is a single order, what is single order? Single order means if I want to measure job satisfaction, right? And I have 5 items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each item has an intent to measure. I feel I'm very satisfied in my job. Every day I feel like to go to my office, right? My supervisor supports me in getting all the job related resources, right? Something like that. So if you go back and recall our performance scale, so each and every item is trying to measure the same construct because this construct is unidimensional. There is no other dimension. Is it clear, class? You may have come across this term, second order, first order, formative, reflective. So it's better to clarify this. So reflective, formative items can be combined to measure the multiple aspect of a construct, while reflective items is a single hit and respondent should answer each item similarly. In the formative items, it might not necessary because one dimension, a person may have a different perception than the other dimension. Now I'll show you with one example. Satisfaction with one of the flight, right, Jet Airways. I'm asking these questions to the customers, understanding their customer satisfaction. Now tell me, if you are flying if you through a air flight, what are the things which will actually help you to get the maximum satisfaction? When you fly or when you take a air flight, what are the things which you consider as a part of customer satisfaction? Their timeliness, their services, pricing, isn't it? And the infrastructure, right? So if I have to measure these 4 aspects, right, through some of the scale, right, don't you think that satisfaction is not a sacrosanct unidimensional? It is a multidimensional construct. Okay. So when I plan to measure customer satisfaction in the aviation sector, I try to see whether my scale is measuring pricing, staff services, and traveling comfort. So customer satisfaction here is a first order or second order? Quickly tell me, it's a first order or second order? Second order, right? And what are the first order constructs? Timeliness, pricing, right? Staffing, and so on, right? Now, if there should be consistency among the items which are measuring the same construct, right? There might not be consistency with the timeliness and the pricing items, but overall we are trying to plus this to overall satisfaction is based on all these dimensions. So next time, remember, the satisfaction is measured through 4 dimensions. Okay. Moving ahead, as I said, materialism. I've shown you this example. This is a first order construct, right? These all are the reflective items. Each and every item is trying to measure materialism through regular code or reverse coded item. Is that clear, class? Should I move ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Step 4, I don't think I would be able to cover more than that. Step 8, let me just cover all these steps so that we can do or get the idea of scale tomorrow through factor analysis demonstrations, right? So reviewed by the experts, this is the part. Step 4, we have collected number of items, we have designed the items, taking care of all components, affective, cognitive, and behavior. We had tried to develop 20 items for measuring gossip. We are not sure whether this is unidimensional or this is multidimensional, whether second order or first order, but we had tried to capture the construct in a very holistic manner. Let's see what happens. So we have done with our homework, and now we are asking experts to give their opinion whether they think that this question is measuring the given construct or not. How do we do that? We need to provide the working definition of the construct, because an expert cannot do the rating in isolation. A person needs to understand how are you defining it. Then only this person will map it against the statements which you have created. Is that okay? Yeah. So can evaluate the items, clarity and conciseness by rating relevance as high, moderate or low, and can also try to understand whether you are able to capture the phenomena which you have defined. Right? This is called content analysis, a content related validity, content validity. Now you must have heard these all terms. Should I need to explain it, or you people are clear with those validity and reliability part?
Quick recap would help, ma'am.
Okay. So validity is something which is trying to measure. Can you define quickly what is validity? You are measuring something which you intend to measure. It's all about the construct, right? So if you have defined a construct nicely, your validity means through the items, you are measuring exactly what you are defining. Okay. Reliability is something every time you are measuring it consistently. So it should not happen that the scores are varying too much over time. That means your scale is not correct, right? So the scores for a given construct should be pretty much consistent over time. Then only this scale is valid and reliable. Both the characteristics, we call it psychometric characteristics, right? Now there are two kinds of validity. One section of validity which is internal validity and external validity. Internal validity is something which says that there should not be confounding effect. What is confounding? What you are trying to explain, you should only measure that. There should not be extra component. If there is more confounding variables, the conclusion of the study cannot be generalized, right? External validity, your sample should be such a diverse sample so that you are able to generalize the study for the target population. Now, sometimes, most of the time when you are writing a research paper in the methodology section, there was a lot of emphasis on sample demographics. Because sample demographics tells you that I'm not studying a specific, very narrow group of people, and then I'm saying it can be generalized. If you want to generalize your study, you need to have the right representation through your large sample. That's why large sample is preferred. Now, there are three C's in the validity: content, criterion, and construct. Right? Criterion validity, content validity is different than face validity. I'm going to explain it in the next slide. Criterion validity, as I said, the construct should be able to make inferences for the criterion variable. Now, for example, as I said, gossip leads to turnover intention. So when you are actually trying to develop a scale on gossip, you include turnover intentions items to see whether gossip is really, positively related to turnover intentions or not. It could be of three types: predictive, concurrent, and post-predictive, right? So your homework is come prepared with these kinds of validity for the next class. I'll not explain it, right? Construct-related validity, which says convergent, it could be convergent or it could be discriminant validity. Construct is the main validity, which actually has the aspects of content and criterion. That is why most of the time we emphasize a lot on convergent and discriminant validity, because it actually gives you the overall, this is the, this is the most predominant factor of validity. So convergent says that it should have high correlation among the items for a similar construct, right? Discriminant validity says it should not be highly related with the items of the other constructs. So it is discriminant, right, from the other unique construct, right? Reliability will be of four types: test, retest, alternate forms, split half, and iterator. Test, retest, that mostly we do that test, retest, which is if you have 10 items scale, what test, retest does is actually divides the, the same set of questions have been repeated multiple times for the same respondents, and we want to see whether the responses have high correlation or not. Alternate forms, you try to change certain set of questions and you try to see whether there is a correlation or not, right? We use this alternate form sometimes to check whether a student has done the questions on her own or not. A split half method, which is the most important method actually, because in most of the softwares, this is the by default setting. A split half is nothing but your Cronbach alpha. What does it do? It divides your items, right, in half, and then it tries to see if there are 10 items, you divide it 5 and 5, and then you try to see different combinations of correlations from the first half to the second half. Iterator is something when there are two raters assessing the same construct, right? So whether there is a consistency in those responses or not, right? If it is measuring engagement, it should have the consistency with the iterator as well, right? Moving ahead, you need to include certain validation items, social desirability items. Ideally, people should include certain items so that we get to know whether the person is biased or not. But in practically, it becomes very difficult. So because the designed questions itself are too long. So the moment you include these items, the question becomes too long and lengthy, and it becomes difficult to capture the responses. So this is the ideal way. We should try to include certain scales of social desirability so that I get to know, for example, if I'm responding through those 5 items, I get to know whether Swati is biased in her approach or not. Okay. Administer items is step number 6 to a development sample, do a pilot testing, and then you can actually, take it to the larger sample with the final set of items. Ideally, it should be 20 times more than your number of items, right? If you are having 20 items, which means 20 into 20, which would be 400 sample size you should take to test it for the reliability and validity of your scale, right? However, the thumb rule says even if you are not able to do the 20 times, at least 5 times of the total number of items, you should have the sample size. So if I'm having 20 items to measure gossip, I should at least collect 100 data points to start with the data analysis as a next step. Is that okay? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Moving ahead, why a large sample? As I said, large sample helps you to understand the covariation among the items, right? Because in a small sample, it may not be stable. Development sample may not represent the population for which the scale is intended. For example, you are making a scale for gossip. It's a very generic phenomena, and you are concluding based on 100 people, right? So development sample is fine just to see the pattern, trend, right? Sometimes what do? We actually try to see, we do an EFA with the help of that development sample, and then we collect more sample to test whether my construct is has the same set of validity or reliability or not, right? There are 2 different ways in which a sample may not be too representative of the larger population, because the level of attribute in a given sample may not capture the overall attributes of the population. And sometimes, when you actually try to collect data in quantitative terms, you say that we have captured 700, 800 data points. But if you say it in the qualitative sense that, the entire sample is in the age group of 25 to 30. So in a qualitative manner, your sample is very, it's very similar kind of people are responding. And then you can't conclude something beyond that population, beyond that age group. So you need to make sure that your population is sufficiently representing the overall range of the respondents for which you want to make the conclusion, right? Or else, if you're taking only sample of 25 to 30 age group, you cannot conclude something beyond that age group. Okay. Plain sampling could be of 2 types: probability sampling, non-probability sampling. Most of the time, we get into the second category where we say that we follow convenient sampling and purposive sampling, because it's, to be honest, in research, it's very difficult to go for a random sampling kind of a thing. Evaluate the items. You need to understand the items measuring the same construct. If it is a single order construct, should have high correlation, right? If there is reverse scoring, you need to convert that into regular coding. And you also need to check the item scale correlation. Scale means overall correlation, overall the average of those items. So your each item should have the high correlation with the average score of the scale. Right? If there are 5 items measuring job satisfaction, so the overall scale, the average of 5 items should have the high correlation with the single item, each item. That means each item is a reflective item and is measuring the same construct. Moving ahead, evaluate the items, item variance. As Dipakshi was asking, that the items, the valuable attributes for a scale item is relatively high variance. I want people to rate from 1 to 5. I don't want everyone to rate on 4 and 5. Right? So if you have more variance in your items, that means your items are able to capture a diverse set of people. But having said that, it should also have a tendency to come to a mean value. So that is why it should be normally distributed. Why do we do that? What does the need of having an item means? If you don't have converging something to the mean value, how would you come up with the value, that cutoff value? Right? So for example, employee engagement, if you have 10 items scale, it should have good variation from 1 to 5. But at the same time, you should also be trying for those who are highly engaged if there are 10 items, for example, right? And there is a scale of 1 to 5. The highest score possible would be 50. Right? 10 items in a scale of 1 to 5. If I'm highly engaged, mostly engaged, right, fully engaged, then I would rate in every item 5. Imagine all the items are regular coded item, and 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, it becomes highest score 10. Right? Now, if a person is getting a score of 20, 30, what can I conclude? That the person is less engaged. Right? So that is why it is also very important to have center of the range of possible scores. Otherwise, item might fail to detect the certain values of the construct. How will you come up with the cutoff word, right? Now, coming to if you're not clear with this, it will become more clear when we see it exactly in the when we demonstrate you in the through factor analysis, right? Now, moving ahead, this is how the alpha values is calculated. I'm not going to give you the overall calculation, but yes, K is the number of items and R is the average correlation among all the items. So if this is an example, if there are 10 item scale and the average correlation between the item is 0.5, this is how your machine calculates the value of alpha. No magic going on. So machine does a lot of combination. This is a split half method of calculating reliability. And this is how you get a value of reliability coefficient. Can it be more than 1? Can it be more than 1?
No, ma'am.
No, right? Because denominator is always more, right? 1 plus KR, right? So you have to, but higher the values, better the scale, isn't it? The last part is step 8, right? As we are also moving towards the end of the session. Effect of scale length on reliability, as I said, optimal trade-off between brevity and reliability. Effects of dropping bad items. If there is an item, right, as somebody was asking about cross-loading, if there is an item which has very low correlation with the overall average score, right, and dropping that item increases my alpha value. What does it mean? Dropping that item, because this item has very low correlation with the average score, and the moment I remove it, which value has improved? Which value will improve? A or R bar? Average R. If I reduce a low correlation item, my R bar will be improved, average R, isn't it? And my K would be reduced. K is the number of items, right? So the moment you drop some of the items, you must have realized it if you have followed some methodology or some techniques. If some of the items which are not loaded nicely or are having cross loading and have low loading, the moment you drop those items, your overall reliability coefficient improves, right? So you need to make sure that the tinkering with the scale length, you need to make sure that we are not having a very small scale of 2 items or 3 items, or neither we are having a big scale of 20 items to measure a single construct. It should have a good balance so that your scales are not very lengthy and respondents are not exhaustive. On the other hand, it should not be only 1 or 2 item scale, otherwise you won't be able to capture the item variance, right? So moving ahead, we'll cover that, right? I'm not going to discuss the this part, but yes, so we'll discuss the these are the so many things. I won't be able to capture all this, so let me clarify. I would like to capture this part, factor analysis part. Tomorrow I'll showcase the moment. Imagine that you have collected data on your 20 items, right? For gossip, for example, how are you going ahead, right? For testing the validity and reliability. Is that okay? So we have understood the 8 steps. We like to go ahead with how do we exactly do that? How do we exactly follow those 8 steps through the data? So are you excited for tomorrow's class?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So if you have some data points, do bring that for practice, right? If you have SPSS in your machine, you can do it. But since it's an online class and only 90 minutes are assigned, it will not be possible to do it hands-on in the regular session. But yeah, through your screenshots, you can probably do it later. Okay. So the same exact 8 sessions which we have understood today, we'll do that in the next class tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Okay. Yeah. Thank you everyone for being so much such.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Samri. Yes, I do.
Thank you, ma'am. Appealingly pointed out by ma'am, a construct is a hypothetical variable composed of different elements that are thought to be related. I would like to express our deep thanks on behalf of Birla Institute of Technology of Campus Lalpur to our guest, Dr. Swati Dey ma'am, for such an amazing and informative presentation and giving us an insight on this relevant topic. I also extend my gratitude to Dr. Vandana Bhattacharjee ma'am, Director of our Center, for providing us such a platform. My sincere thanks is directed to Dr. Satyajit Chaudhary sir and Dr. Syed Anis Sadar sir, who took effort to organize this event. Special acknowledgement to all my faculty members for joining this session and making this a great success. I also thank the committee members who contributed in this event. I would also like to express my gratefulness to all the attendees for taking out time and supporting us in our endeavor. We look forward to conduct more such events hereafter and hope ma'am will join us in future too.
Thank you for such an informative session, ma'am. I will definitely use all these techniques in my CSR project and current study. Thank you for giving so much knowledge, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Farhan. Thank you. If you have any specific doubts regarding your data sets, do ask questions. I'll keep 15 minutes window for a specific Q&A if you have any. Okay. So thank you, class, and see you tomorrow. We have a session. We'll try to give as demonstrated session through the pictures and everything as much as possible. Okay, I understand the constraint when you are attending an online session. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.